I'll warn you next time. Welcome, everyone.
In progress.
I now call the February 28th, 2023 Special City Council meeting to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The City of Bothell is now providing the option of attending council meetings remotely or in person. Public comment will be allowed both in writing or verbally. Verbal comments may be taken either in person or remotely. Sign-up sheets were provided online by the City Clerk's office via link from the agenda. A call-in number was provided on the meeting agenda for members of the public who wish to call in by phone to listen live to the meeting. If you have called in, we ask that you mute your device so as not to interfere with the meeting. If a participant fails to mute their connection and causes a disruption to the meeting, the connection will be terminated. Also, this evening we are going to use a new format for council study sessions. When we get to that point in the agenda tonight, we will take a recess to move to room 107, over there, for the remainder of the meeting. Please note room 107 is Teams enabled, so virtual attendees will need to use the Teams link provided on the first page of the agenda. As a reminder, you can also watch the meeting on YouTube or BCTV without having to break your connection. At this point, we'll take a moment to take a roll call of the council members by position number. Please say here when the city clerk calls your name.
Councilmember Zorns?
Here.
Mayor Thompson?
Here.
Councilmember Alders?
Here.
Councilmember McNeil?
Here.
Councilmember Menke?
Here.
Councilmember Dodd?
Here.
Deputy Mayor Alcabra?
Here.
All present, Your Honor.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to reiterate some meeting guidelines. For all remote meeting attendees, please speak clearly and pause frequently. State your name each time before speaking, and mute your microphone when not speaking. Before we begin, I believe staff has items on the agenda they wish to speak to. So, City Manager, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, City Council. There are two items on the agenda tonight that staff are requesting be removed from the agenda prior to approval. They'll both be returning at a later date, but there's some additional work that needs to be done. The two items in question are Agenda Bill 23-024, which is a resolution to update the finance director to represent Bothell's participation in the state local government investment pool. It's a mouthful. And the other one, that was on the consent calendar previously. The other is Agenda Bill 23-029, consideration of the purchase of 3 Ford Pursuit rated police interceptor units. Again, there's some additional staff work on both of those items that we received additional information on them after the publication of the agenda. For transparency purposes, we kept them on the agenda and would like to remove them at this point now. And again, we'll add them back when appropriate.
Thank you. Are there any other changes to the agenda? Seeing none, I will accept a motion to approve the agenda with the edits made by the city manager or requested by the city manager. Please.
I move to accept the agenda as amended.
Second.
All right, I've got a motion from Councilmember Dodd and a second from Councilmember Alders to approve the meeting agenda minus the two items requested by staff. Would anybody like to speak to the motion? Seeing none, City Clerk.
Please say yes or no when I call your name. Councilmember Zorns?
Yes.
Mayor Thompson?
Yes.
Councilmember Alders?
Yes.
Councilmember McNeil?
Yes.
Councilmember Menke?
Yes.
Councilmember Dodd?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Alcabra?
Yes.
Passes 7-0.
All right, next up we have public engagement opportunities. Transit changes in 2024. You can share your thoughts on transit changes as Community Transit, King County Metro, and Sound Transit plan for bus service changes to prepare for light rail coming to Snohomish County. You can take the survey by March 10th at communitytransit.org/transit changes. We have a middle housing walking tour coming up on Saturday, March 18th at 10 a.m. You can join staff for conversations about the proposals while we look at existing examples of middle housing types like duplexes, triplexes, and ADUs. You can learn more at bothellwa.gov/middle housing walking tour. Keys, wallet, phone, cup. Join fellow Eastside residents who are choosing to reuse. Participate by bringing your own cup to participating coffee shops and by entering to win a personal reuse toolkit. You can learn more at bothellwa.gov/BYOC. The next part of the meeting is a little bit bittersweet because we've reached the wonderful time in somebody's career when they get to call it a career, and we have 2 retirements that the rest of us aren't super happy about because we're losing some really good people, but we're excited to get to honor them tonight. First off is Eddie Lowe. Whereas Eddie Lowe joined the city of Bothell as a civil engineer on July 8th, 1985, when the city's population was under 10,000 people, and whereas Eddie has honorably served the citizens of Bothell for over 37 years, during which time the population has increased to 45,000, and whereas Eddie has distinguished himself throughout his career through the quality of his work, the breadth and depth of his knowledge, and the respect he has earned from his colleagues, managers, elected officials, funding partners, and members of the public, and whereas Eddie's dedication, positive influence, high level of customer service, thorough staff work, and quality projects have made a significant contribution to the Bothell community, and whereas Eddie has been a friend and mentor to his colleagues, encouraging their own professional growth, and whereas Eddie was a major contributor to the Bothell community as it exists today by directing the planning, design, and construction of the city's infrastructure, and whereas Eddie is known for securing funding for city projects from a variety of sources throughout his career, including $48.8 million in 2022 alone, and whereas we celebrate Eddie's invaluable contributions of service and friendship, and whereas we wish Eddie all the best as he retires from the city and enjoys the next chapter of his life. Now therefore I, Mason Thompson, Mayor of the City of Bothell, do hereby proclaim the City of Bothell's appreciation to Eddie Lowe for his many contributions to the City of Bothell and our greater community. Eddie, thank you. And one thing, if I can just say real fast, like I think sometimes those of us up here on the dais are insulated from like the greater staff community. And I was talking with our federal lobbyist last year about a project, and he mentioned, oh yeah, I've known Eddie for years. Eddie shows up on the Hill, Eddie talks about things, and like people know him from like when he's been in DC. And I'm like, okay, that's not what I expected to hear. But Eddie, well done. And congratulations, and I have something for you.
Thank you, Mayor Thompson. I mean, this is incredible journey for me. But anyway, good evening, Mayor Thompson, Deputy Mayor Alcabra, and council members. First, thank you, Mayor Thompson and City Council, for this proclamation, and this means a lot to me. It is my honor for me to hear such kind words. I'm lucky to have worked with so many professionals, and sad to say goodbye to all my friends in Bothell. Thank you to City Manager Stannard, Public Works Director Lenhart, others in Public Works, and all my colleagues that I've worked in Bothell. Many thanks to my partners in the region. And most importantly, thanks to the Bothell community for the opportunity to be part of seeing the vision of the community coming together and experiencing the growth to make Bothell a sustainable and inviting place for all. This is bittersweet moment for me personally after so many years in the profession I love and enjoy. Bothell will always have a special place in my heart as I venture into my next chapter in my retirement. So I'm a little bit choked up, but thank you very much.
Eddie, thank you. Next up, we have...
Mayor, if
yes.
I may interject.
You absolutely may.
I would love to invite our Public Works Director, Erin Lenhart, to the microphone if you would indulge a few words from her and then perhaps me as well.
You know, I have been missing hearing Director Lenhart speak at council meetings, so that is absolutely fine with me.
Thank you, Mayor. So this is my opportunity to try to keep my stuff together up here too. And it is, as both of you mentioned, this is a very bittersweet moment for me as well as the department. And I think the community, those who know, Eddie has been an incredible contributor to this organization and this community for many years. And I have had the great fortune of spending the last 12 years serving with Eddie. And our unique partnership in that we are very different, but I think it is that difference that comes together and really makes a great team. So I just want to join all of you in wishing Eddie well, and we'll continue to do that through this week. But I just wanted to get it on the permanent record. Thank you, Eddie.
And Aaron, don't get any ideas.
I'll keep it short in that I've really only had the pleasure of working with Eddie for a few short months. But, you know, as you mentioned in the accomplishments, Mayor, the $48+ million last year, when I was first getting onboarded in June, and I kept hearing Eddie and all of the money he was bringing in, for a minute I thought I was being pranked, especially as he's telling me about a once-in-a-career opportunity of achieving funding for Bothell Way, and it was no prank. He really pulled it off. And I'd say something that we all have in common if we're here tonight, anyone who attends council meetings, watches online, serves as a council member, or serves as staff, one of the things that we have in common is that we're here because we care about our community and we want to make an investment. Not many of us can be confident that we're going to make a legacy that will be seen for generations to come. Eddie can retire knowing he has left behind some excellent work that has really shaped this community for the better. And for generations, people will appreciate the work that he had done. So Eddie, I'm excited for you. Family's important. You get to go make that be your primary job. And if you ever want to come around and help us score some grants, we'll let you. Thank you, Eddie.
And you'd be better be wearing like a Hawaiian shirt or something and seem super relaxed.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yes, of course.
Thank you. Eddie, I just wanted to extend my heartfelt thank yous. As somebody who's come in and as a newly elected official, you basically took me under the wings and you showed me the way to ensure that I can represent my community by going out and leveraging the work and the things that we do here at home and getting grants. You started with the city, I believe, in 1985. Is that right? Well, a year before that, I graduated from high school. And so when you see the sign that says "for a day in a lifetime," you have truly impacted this community right here, the community of Bothell, for a lifetime. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you, Council Member. McNeil, this is, it touches me because, Bothell has been a part of me and for a long time. So I'm glad that we've come this far to make Bothell a great place for everybody.
All right, Chief Kroon, I know you've been waiting this whole time. I think it's your turn now. Our fire chief, Bruce Kroon, is retiring as well, and we've got a proclamation for him. Whereas Bruce Kroon joined the city of Bothell as fire chief on September 18th, 2017, and whereas Bruce received the Chief Fire Officer designation from the Center for Public Safety Excellence on December 3rd, 2019, becoming one of only 1,426 CFO designees worldwide. And whereas Bruce helped organize the successful passing of the Safe and Secure Levy and Bond, which funded several public safety positions and the replacement of fire stations 42 and 45, and whereas Bruce played a key role in the design and construction of both fire stations, and whereas Bruce led the fire department successfully through the pandemic, implementing safety protocols for staff while maintaining excellent service to the public, and whereas Bruce has been a friend and mentor to his colleagues, encouraging their own professional growth, and whereas we celebrate Bruce's invaluable contributions of service and friendship, And whereas we wish Bruce all the best as he retires from the city and enjoys the next chapter of his life. Now, therefore, I, Mason Thompson, Mayor of the City of Bothell, do hereby proclaim the City of Bothell's appreciation to Chief Bruce Kroon for his many contributions to the City of Bothell and our greater community. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you for those kind words. But once I got up here, I thought I probably should have prepared something for this, which could be a mistake, but I'll get through it. Eddie, you rock. I almost wish I would have got first behind Eddie. He's such a rock in this city. It's been so long. It's so cool, and I do appreciate that. I've only had the experience, the pleasure of working here for 5 years. It's been 5 great years. I've loved it. This position came along at a absolute perfect time for me, and it was the perfect place for me to do this. Being familiar with the area, and I have to say, just for City Attorney Byrne, before I go Bellevue for many years, it's kind of an inside joke. He'll get it. Being familiar with it, I knew Bothell was just a great community, and what I loved about that coming here was the hometown feeling that it had and still has. And I was so excited that this last year we were able to do the 4th of July parade again. That is huge. I just love that. And it's just, it's fewer and fewer places have that today, but Bothell still has that. You know, even though we're growing and we're maturing as a city, we still have that. People come out, they put their lawn chairs out, and they have a good time. And it's like that all year round. And people are so wonderful, and I've just been blessed to do that. And I would just mention real quick, sometimes my social graces aren't the best. And today, as I was packing up and I was getting my laptop ready to turn into IS on my phone, just before I did it, I thought, yeah, I should probably send something out to the troops, you know, some kind of a farewell thing, which I hate doing. So I typed something up and sent it out. Got up, turned on my laptop, came back down, getting ready to leave, and thought, boy, I should have sent something out to ELT. And so it was too late. But I just want to say to all the ELT folks here, and I mentioned it yesterday, this is an outstanding group of people we have that help run the city along with the council. They are dedicated. They care very, very deeply about the city, and very, very professional. I'm always floored with the conversations we have in ELT once we get past the chit chat with Paul at the beginning. But it's amazing, and it wasn't a slight on the group. I really loved working with you, and I want to just recognize you at the meeting that how much I appreciated working with all of you this time. So thank you very much. I appreciate that. I would like to leave you with one thing. We have built 2 outstanding fire stations. We had a ribbon cutting for Station 45 a while back, and Station 42 is coming up. I want everybody to let you know, March 25th, is Saturday, 10 o'clock. We'd love to see the council out there and the public would come out there and help us dedicate officially that station. We were so excited to have that. Firefighters are digging it. They really love it. And we appreciate the public support in that 2018 bond. It really took us a while to get there. We got there. We've done it. And we've built 2 fabulous stations that will be in use for many, many years. So thank you very much. It's very humbling, and I do appreciate that. Thank you.
City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor, and Chief, congratulations. It's no surprise. 2 things that we just witnessed make all the sense if you know Bruce. One is that he used his first words to praise Eddie. That's the kind of leader that he is. But also, I think it's a great honor that one of the capstones of his career in fire service, 32 years in this region, is to be able to say job well done on getting the 2 fire stations rebuilt again. And really, he did it every step of the way. And every conversation I had with him, you pointed back to his gratitude to the community for making that possible. And that's, again, indicative of the leadership that he brings. And so as we talked about retirement and dates, he mentioned turning in his phone and his computer. That uniform goes out the door today because I don't want to do that ribbon cutting or that celebration with the community without without him there leading the ceremony. So we'll get to see him again, and I'm glad. And so maybe we'll have to do a happy hour with ELT to make up for that email or something in between too. Yeah, you're absolutely buying. Back in 2017 is when the chief's career here began in Bothell, and it began in this room with an oath of office. And I said this yesterday at the celebration that we had for his career, but I will just note that when he took that oath, there was 3 words that really stood out to me around what he pledged to do, and that was to lead with compassion, courage, and integrity. And all of us that know the chief, he absolutely did that throughout his career. So we're grateful, and you've made Bothell better. Thank you.
When I was new on council, I found out that Chief had worked at the city of Bellevue. I can say it because I don't say it all the time. And my dad worked at the fire department in Bellevue for 35, 40 years, a long time. And my dad is a man of few words, and he doesn't throw them around lightly. And I told him that our chief was from Bellevue. He's like, oh, who? I was like, Bruce. And he just looked at me and he said, Bruce is a good man. And he doesn't throw those words around easily, and it means a lot coming from him. So, Bruce, you've always been aces in my eyes, regardless of what everybody else says about you, because of that. So I appreciate your service and who you are. All right. Next up is a city manager report. Now for something with fewer feelings.
I mean, you'd like to think so. Well, thank you, Mayor. And thank you for also noting at the top of the meeting again that we are trying something new with our study sessions. I just wanted to highlight that again here. The council had a retreat recently, and one of the things that we talked about was how to make conversations on times when the council isn't making decisions, but instead is in learning mode, and that's what study sessions are intended to do. So again, we will be moving into a room down the hall. There's opportunity for people to come join us. There's seats. This will still be streamed, and there's instructions on the agenda. For next week, I want to also note that during the study session, we will be talking about the council's vision and priorities, and a chance to really now bring those forward into the community and share with the community. So I'm looking forward to that. That'll also be a study session. And again, we'll try this format, and we're looking for feedback both from the community and certainly from the council, and we can test adjust along the way. Another thing I wanted to highlight is that coming up in March, on March 14th, the council meeting will be dedicated to interviews for board and commission recruitment in 2023. There were a total of 27 positions opened for boards and commissions, including anyone who was up for reappointment. So there's a lot of passionate people looking to serve the community, and so we're grateful. In fact, right now we're looking at a total of 45 applications, but in case anybody's auditing my words, just know too that our GIS team is still both helping to plot addresses to make sure that everybody's eligible to serve, because there are location requirements with that, but also providing a map for council to use in your interviews to be considering geographic diversity among positions. We have, again, a number of applicants and a lot of interest. I wanted to highlight 2 things is that staff is intending, and we've just touch on this, and we will talk more in the future, but we're intending on holding back on two of the boards and commissions around having interviews. One is for the library board. As the city manager, I've received a letter recently from the current chair and the librarian requesting that we take a look at that purpose and function. And so with potential changes and the fact that we actually had fewer applicants than we have openings on the library board, the thought here is to pause, but we'll bring more information back to council and some analysis on what might work there. Similarly with the Shorelines board, we did have one application. it is different. It's on a different cycle, as council may recall, than other boards and commissions of where all the positions are appointed, I believe, for 5 years, and then they're all up at the same time. So all the positions are up, and there's no activity planned for 2023, but there will be for 2024. So knowing we have a lot of interviews to have, and there's not a time sensitivity, and bringing somebody in to start on the Shorelines Board and then saying, congratulations, you get to wait a year. I think we have some time to look at that again, and we'll, again, revisit with council in a future study session about some board and commission refinements and look at the Shorelines Board, and then we can go back out. So the city clerk is communicating with anyone who has applied for those 2 positions. It's 2 people for library board, 1 for Shorelines, and also encouraging them if they have any interest in other board and commissions. And so there'd be nothing that would disqualify them from participating in being considered for another board and commission. So more information to come on that. Again, we'll have a great night of interviews and hearing from passionate people who want to serve Bothell on March 14th, and looking forward to that as well. So that's my report for this evening.
Thank you. Moving on to council committee reports. Any council members have a report on a committee? Councilmember Zorns?
Mine is very short. It's for LTAC. The Visitors Center with the chamber is open, the new one, and it's got a brand new window and great light, and they are focusing in on having a corner for tourism and a corner for businesses for information, which is great. And then the last piece that I think might be an interest to you is the hotel motel tax revenue. Looks like it will hit the mark of pre-pandemic. So for this last year. So those are my 2 bits.
Councilmember Aldrich?
Thank you, Mayor. I have an update on the King County Coalition on Homelessness. Each meeting, we hear an update from the Oaks Enhanced Shelter, and as well as an update from the King County Regional Homelessness Authority. And so the Oaks is actually doing really well. They're at full capacity. 5 residents recently transitioned into housing. They are looking for funding to do some kitchen repairs and exploring how they could get that funded. KCHRA is in the process of getting public feedback for their 5-year plan, and you can actually attend their board meetings and provide public comment because they are public meetings of a public entity. And then one of the opportunities is to weigh in on sub-region specific activities. North King County is the first sub-region to organize as an official sub-region and sign an ILA. So we are kind of leading the region in that regard. And then a final update is that Kenmore joined the Shoreline Community Court. So now they are benefiting from a community court model as well. And that is the update from the King County Coalition on Homelessness, North King County. Thank you.
All right, everybody else is looking straight ahead, so I think that might be it. Next up is visitor comment. The city has accepted visitor comment in writing as well as accepted sign-up sheets for those who wish to speak at tonight's meeting. Written comments submitted to the city clerk no later than 3 p.m. today were forwarded to all city council members and are part of the record. When the clerk calls your name, you will have 3 minutes to speak. Please note the council will receive your input, but on the advice of our city attorney, we do not engage in discussion of these topics. Staff will make note of items requiring follow-up. City clerk.
Thank you, Mayor Thompson. First, I'd like to let you know we've received 2 written comments for this evening. One from Rosemary Sutton, who wrote regarding middle housing. The other from Emily Fry, who also wrote regarding middle housing and affordable housing. I also want to note that we've received numerous emails outside of this sign-up process for tonight's meeting regarding the middle housing, and those have all been forwarded to the Imagine Bothell distribution list, so they will be included with the record. So on to live comment. We received a number tonight of people that requested to speak. I will say before we start calling, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. There's a light at the podium there. It'll be green when we start. It'll turn yellow at 30 seconds and red when you're done. So the first person is Andrew Nelson. So if you want to come up to the podium, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Mayor, Deputy Mayor, City Council, I hope you're doing well. I'm here to speak tonight in support of middle housing. As many of you know, Bothell has become quite an expensive place to live recently. The reasoning, in my opinion, is we have a supply and demand issue. You know, Bothell is a great place to live and a great place to learn about life. I've been learning about life in Bothell for 23 of my 25 years on Earth. You know, we're in a great location. We're 30 minutes from Seattle with other suburbs close by. We are a vibrant, increasingly diverse community. You know, no wonder people want to live here. I get it. I welcome them. That being said, our housing supply is bland. We have single-family homes, we have condos, we have apartments, all of which are extremely expensive. A one-bedroom, one-bathroom apartment in Bothell goes for $1,900 a month. That is a mortgage to some people. I have seen countless childhood friends from Maywood Hills, Canyon Park Middle School, and Bothell High School have to move away, not because they wanted to, but because they had to economically. I drive by Maywood Hills every day to get to work, and I wonder to myself, how many of those kids are going to face that problem, the affordability problem? And the answer is ideally not many. If we update our zoning code to include middle housing and diversify our housing supply, I love that motto. You know, thank you all for your time and your service. Thank you, city staff, for all you do too. And thank you for letting me speak. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Jeremy Tadros.
Yep. Hello, council members. I'd like to also speak in favor of the proposals to expand middle housing. It can be taboo to discuss one's personal finances publicly, but I think it's necessary to help you and detractors for the proposals to understand why they are necessary. Online, I often see comments and posts questioning the need for middle housing and questioning whether there is a housing supply issue in our city. My wife and I are both middle and high school educators. Our household income is around $130,000 a year. We live a comfortable life, but as we are considering starting a family, we've been looking a lot more into home ownership. When checking Zillow and Redfin for homes in our price range, maxing at around $500K, if we put in, that's kind of if we kind of push it there, there's a total of 10 homes in Bothell. 6 of those are manufactured homes, which you really cannot get a whole lot of equity on usually. Of the 4 remaining, they are condos and townhomes. And for those of you who are also currently searching for homes to kind of know, those aren't really foregone conclusions. We're competing with people who may be wealthier than us, but also corporations who are now buying these up for rental properties and to make them Airbnbs. This is clearly not enough to supply or satisfy the supply issues within Bothell. I'd also like to ask every member on council, when was the last time you rented or searched for a home to live in? Bothell's housing deficiency could be something that could be managed if it wasn't for the fact that housing prices continue to rise. Even a few years ago, these homes going for $500K were not as expensive as they are now. Bothell residents who are not making 6 figures as individuals simply cannot keep up for how quickly these costs are ballooning. By changing our zoning laws and increasing the height of buildings, we can actually begin to stabilize prices to help make Bothell as affordable as it used to be. People who are skeptical of these policies have brought up in the past real concerns, such as infrastructure issues, as well as some issues with this potentially being kind of like a buyout for certain real estate firms. And also there's issues with how are we going to actually make these affordable. However, I'd also caution the skeptics here to not let the perfect be the enemy of good here. Bothell's at a crossroads. Does it want to maintain its bedroom community status, or does it want to be a place that is multi-generational and is welcoming and able to have a lot of people here who are not just kind of wealthy and all that kind of stuff. So please thank you for your time, and please vote yes for these proposals.
Thank you. Next, we have Sarah Gustafson. And with her, I believe, is Erin Levitin.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sarah Gustafson, and I live in the Norway Hill neighborhood of Bothell. As an individual resident, I urge council to call a vote on the middle housing proposal as soon as possible. If not by April 1st, then please set a deadline, say July 1st. Today, I'm here in solidarity and gratitude for the many folks supporting middle housing, renter and homeowner, boomer and Gen Z, for those who've already built middle housing and want to create more, to those who have lived in middle housing and want others to have that same opportunity. At the last council meeting, I saw 7 conscientious individuals on this dais trying to balance the need for action on housing with the desire to extend our city staff's great work to educate and engage the public. As you can tell, my family and I love public engagement. But right now, I come down on the side of action, and I ask you to do the same, because of the folks who may never be included in public engagement. It's not just the renters and other Bothellites who are less likely to get heard for structural reasons. It's not just the folks who want to live in Bothell but can't. It's people who want to stay in their neighborhoods in Rainier Valley or Kent or Burien, but are getting priced out because we can't build enough homes in affluent communities like our own. And most of all, it's future generations who might struggle for a place to live and who will have to tackle the legacy of climate change. At last meeting, the council talked about the importance of trust. I agree, and I believe there are 2 types of trust that the public has. The first is the trust in the city's ability to hear people out, but it's also the trust that our government can make good on its promises, that it is strong and responsive, and that it has the capacity to do great things. Let's do this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and now we have Erin Levitin.
Hello. Hello, my name is Erin, and I love to play at the ball court. My brother and I love to play soccer. With my other brother, he likes to play. Please open the ball court. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. Next, we have Donna Bardsley.
Hello, Council. My name is Donna Bardsley, and I would like to add my voice to support the Missing Middle Housing Amendment. I've watched with interest as the Planning Commission has considered this amendment, and I'm appreciative of the thoughtful process that has brought it to Council. I echo Sarah and urge you to please bring it to a vote. I also want to acknowledge that I've learned a lot as I've learned about or read about this issue, and I've had many of my own assumptions challenged, and I'm thankful for that. One of my interests is that I am a parent of teenage and college-age children, so I think it goes without saying. I'm also concerned about their ability to afford to stay in our community if they so choose, as well as many other young people in our community and people of all ages who want to stay but have different housing needs. But I don't think that one should have a personal interest or a personal reason to be concerned about our housing crisis, and we are in a housing crisis, as we all know and have covered. I was, a few years ago, totally baffled and I would guess that most people in our community would be as well, to learn that the inconspicuous and harmless housing types, like those found in the lower Maywood area, are actually illegal through the rest of the city. And this is not unique to Bothell, but it is our reality that our housing crisis is a feature, not a bug of our zoning laws. So I find it unethical that in a severe housing shortage, we continue to think that it is okay to make building a variety of housing types difficult at best and illegal at worst. I am excited about expanding housing choice in Bothell to provide more easily for unmet housing needs for members of our community. I'm excited about encouraging infill housing in order to reduce sprawl and the resulting ecological harm and pollution. I'm excited to open up land use options for homeowners at different stages in life and Perhaps most importantly, to rectify the past use of unnecessary government control for exclusionary practices. I'm glad to live in a community where our city leaders recognize the need to have local responsibility for collective problems and the need to address the intended and unintended consequences of decisions from long ago. Expanding middle housing options is one tool at our disposal to attack a problem that does not have one easy magic fix-all solution, but it is the next simple and necessary step. So please say yes to legalizing more housing in Bothell. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Felicia Walker.
Hi, my name's Felicia Walker, and I've been a resident of Bothell for about 20 years, since '99 now. I'm here tonight to also lend my voice to support the effort to bring more middle housing to Bothell. We need it because there needs to be something between renting and owning. I know I've talked to younger coworkers, people who have good jobs. I work in the software industry. And they're really sad because they are just convinced they're never going to own a home because it's just out of their reach. And I even realized, even with my salary, having been in, a career for 20 years, it would probably be difficult to move back into my own neighborhood because they're putting up larger, more expensive houses. I was lucky enough to buy my home 20 years ago, but I also know that times are much different now, and it would be just much more difficult. So I believe people need to have more options in order to build equity for themselves. I've read, can't remember the report on the city, about some of the main reasons for objecting to middle housing, and there are legitimate concerns such as infrastructure and traffic, but a lot of the main reasons, they feel rooted in classism and racism. I mean, we're basically saying that changing the character of a neighborhood or worrying about bringing in crime is saying that people who can't afford an expensive house are not good enough for your neighborhood. Especially since these people may be lower income, which is why they're looking at middle housing. And we know that a lot of lower income people can be from the BIPOC community. Same with crime, saying that people who can't afford a large, expensive house will bring crime into your neighborhood just seems very misplaced. It will increase crime as people not having stable, affordable housing, which will create, put them in a desperate situation. This is why we need more choices. So I think it's time for people who are like me, who are lucky enough to have a chance to own a home, to stop trying to pull the ladder up behind us and make it more difficult for other people just because times have changed or because of reasons, based out of fear. So again, please, I urge everyone to support middle housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Cameron Chapman, who is joining us virtually. Cameron, whenever you're ready, go ahead. You'll have 3 minutes.
Hi there, Council. My name's Cameron. Hold on, I'm just going to mute myself because it's conflicting. I just wanted to mention, I'll make this short because I don't want to run over time. I just wanted to mention that I was one of the people who sent in one of the so-called robo emails at the last meeting. So I just wanted to feel like I had to call in and say it again, kind of like reinforce what we believe isn't like some sort of thing that's made up or something that other people are trying to get us to do. This is stuff that we want to do. I wanted to thank the city staff for providing the ability to have a weekday option to take the middle housing tour. As a retail worker, I usually work on the weekends, so I appreciate having that option available to myself and others. And that's it. I wish that you guys would please pass the middle housing code amendments as soon as possible. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you. Next up, we have Ashley Andrews.
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak today. My name is Ashley Andrews. I am a veteran educator with 12 years of experience and 5 years in the North Shore School District. I'm really grateful for my first year teaching at Bothell High School this year. I really want the students that I teach and for diverse members of our community to be able to have the opportunity to make a home here in Bothell. And I also really want to be able to have the opportunity myself to be able to live in the community in which I work permanently. Given the average cost to buy a typical single-family home in Bothell, as we've heard from so many people today, we have priced people like me who are single out of the market. I worry that the students that I work with who tell me their hopes and their dreams won't have a space to continue to live here after they graduate from high school. It is astounding to me, having lived in other places in our country, that it's illegal to build duplexes and triplexes and cottages and similar modest housing in this area. When I moved here, I just could not believe what people were telling me. I do currently live in a triplex in downtown Bothell, and my dream would be able to live in a place like that I own myself and could provide other opportunities to people like me to be able to live and work in this wonderful community that we have. So I would like to add my voice to everyone else's about supporting the middle housing proposal as it's written, and like others would like to see that come to a vote as quickly as possible so that we can begin addressing the problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Tamara Wood.
Good evening, Bothell City Councilors. I am here today as a Bothell citizen, college student, and parent to advocate and speak about the growing housing crisis affecting our local college and university community. This crisis is creating a barrier for my fellow students striving for higher education, and it is a problem that should not be ignored. The cost of college tuition is already expensive and out of reach for many students. On top of that, the cost of living, especially in Bothell, is becoming increasingly unaffordable. Many of my fellow students struggle to find adequate and safe housing, and the options are often too expensive or struggle to find, they struggle to find adequate and safe housing, and the options are often too expensive or don't fit their family needs. With the high cost of rent, students are sacrificing their education and even their safety to cover their housing costs, taking multiple buses to travel to campus or having long commutes from an affordable neighborhood. If you drive, you must also budget for parking fees, another financial barrier to our educational path. The City Council needs to take action to address this as soon as possible. We don't have another 5 years of studies and outreach to make this common sense amendment a reality. And this is why I support immediate middle housing zoning changes as a safe and logical first step to creating a city accessible to those from all backgrounds, ages, and income brackets. In addition, please consider how we as a city will adjust to social and climate change migration to our region in the next decade. People are coming here to escape increasingly oppressive state governments and the energy and water crisis currently affecting most of the West. We must respond to this quickly and with agility as a city, using data-driven research and listening to those directly harmed by this crisis. This is not a radical change. This is common sense and logical amendments to our city code that reflect our values of social and environmental justice. Changes that lean towards Bothell blossoming into the agile, equitable city we all want to see for ourselves and our children. I would also like to address some of my neighbors who are in opposition to this measure. Please consider the language you're using to describe people who would benefit from middle housing. When you talk about renters as a potential source of crime, or use language like character of the neighborhood, we know exactly what you mean. Please stop the coded language. It's gross and it's dehumanizing on many levels. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Kat Antes Tadros.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for letting me talk. As an educator and a mental health advocate, there are a million reasons why I can think of why it would be easier would make it easier for someone to own their own home a good idea. And one of them is over there and did his own little speech. But a lot of people over the last couple of weeks and tonight have shared their personal stories, including my own spouse. It is extremely personal for me. However, I'm going to be talking about numbers and money because, unfortunately, money does talk, and it's going to keep me from crying, so that's great. Just to give you an idea of what the housing market in Bothell looks like right now, Redfin and Zillow do have different numbers for the median housing price at the moment, but it ranges from $900K to $1.1 million, and the median income for per household for Bothell is $120,000. So that would be a $4,500 mortgage if we put down 20%, which is an astounding $180,000, which would be close to 50% of an average household's income per month. And not including tax information. Accountants, please don't come for me. These are all ballpark numbers. So just to set the scene, supply and demand. So a lot of the people who have talked tonight have talked about supply and demand, so I won't go over that. However, currently 64% of units are owner-occupied housing units, meaning that 30%-ish of people that live in Bothell are renters. So 64% own, 30% ish are renters. Now let's just imagine that 10% of those households are able to purchase a home, whether it be a unit in a duplex condo, single family household, whatever happens to be. With a population around 45,000, and let's say that an additional 10% of our current residents of that 45,000 can afford to own a house. Let's say that someone wants to buy a townhouse worth $500,000, which is around what people can afford with the median current income of $120,000. That would mean around $5,500 in property tax each year that they would have if they had a mortgage. So 10% of those 45,000, 1,500 households-ish. And when you think about in property taxes, if they buy something for $500,000, that's $8 million per year. And so if you think about that, that's about $1 million that goes to the city alone, which can pay for mental health services, parks, updates to Main Street. And there's a lot of options. And then that's not even including the money that goes to North Shore School District, which is about $2.7 million per year, approximately. Again, all of these are numbers that are ballpark. However, financially, it makes a lot of sense in order to do that, in order to allow for more housing options. Thank you for letting me talk.
Thank you. Next up, we have Christian Joyner.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and council members. My name is Kristen Joyner, and I've lived on West Hill for more than 20 years and in the city of Bothell for more than 30. At no time ever was I promised that my neighborhood would not change, that it would remain stagnant, or that no people or no development would happen. In fact, my life has been enriched with the increase in population and new neighbors that have moved in over the past 30 years. It's very easy for people who are comfortable in their own situation to want things to stay the same. It's also easy for the comfortable to ignore the situations and changes that have evolved over time that make it harder and harder for a population to secure those same comforts and possibilities. We know that the ratio of incomes to housing is way out of whack. It's not the same as it was a few years ago. We know there's a shortage of available housing options for our kids, our parents, and our local employees. I live on a street with 3/4 acre lots. Do I love the space? Of course I do, except the weeding. But I think about the opportunity of any one of my neighbors who could build an ADU or a DDU or a duplex or a triplex. And I think it's a great idea. I see that one of the homes on our street that used to house a couple now homes 2 families. Is it perfect for me? To be honest, no. They have a lot of cars and they spill out onto the sidewalk. And I don't like it when people park on the sidewalk. But then I reflect on my own values. And my inconvenience or my not liking it is much less of a concern for me than if people can move into this community that I love. If we get to experience a neighborhood with different housing options, I'm excited for that. Taking away restrictive zoning codes and making it easier for my neighbor Mary to add another home to her property so she can age in place with her health-compromised husband, that's a community I want to be a part of. Fighting zoning changes that allow more options seems a lot like comfortable people not willing to acknowledge the discomfort for the rest of the population who can't find homes. There's been a lot of discussion about middle housing and zoning changes over the last few years. There's been a lot of talk about it. I know some of you are concerned that some residents think it's coming too fast and it's not heard of. I'm here to tell you it's coming too slow. It has been talked about it. The people that are paying attention are working with people who need housing, and there are people that need housing. They've offered solutions, creative solutions, well-researched solutions. And so please vote for middle housing changes and zoning inclusion as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Mark Swanson.
Well, I see I sat at the wrong side of the room. This is going to be mostly anecdotal. Because it's come up, I wasn't going to talk on this, but this global warming, climate change nonsense, let me give you the science. If the United States of America increased its CO2 emissions tenfold for 100 years, the CO2 in the planet would go up less than 1%. If you pay attention to the coefficient of CO2 sensitivity in the atmosphere, the INM CM4, CM5, computer model shows, as well as the science, that if the United States increased our CO2 tenfold for 100 years, the global temperature would go up less than 1%. Do you get that? That's how screwed up this global warming nonsense is. I'll send the council members and the mayor the facts, the science. So let's put off this climate change nonsense, connecting it to middle housing. That's insane. The other thing, I grew up in Federal Way. I spent a lot of time in Federal Way, and I saw the very changes in Federal Way that you guys are proposing here. It's not going to work out well. And here's the thing. I know I'm not going to get my way. You're going to win. But I could not stand to stay at home any longer. I watch the Bothell City Council meetings every week. By the way, the masks are as effective at preventing the virus communication as a chain link fence is at keeping mosquitoes out of your backyard. Please review Patrick Ewing testimony on February 7th. He says it all for me. There's no rush for this. And lastly, I'd like to thank Robin Schaefer for having an extremely valuable internet way for me to speak tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Swanson. That's all the people I have signed up for this evening.
And thank you, Eddie.
Please direct your public comment to the council.
That's all I have signed up to speak. However, if there's anybody else in the audience that wishes to speak, please raise your hand. Mr. Root, go ahead. And the others, if you fall in line, and you'll have 3 minutes. Sorry.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Deputy Mayor, City Council members, city staff, citizens, my name is William Root. I live near Stipek Park in Bothell. My wife and I moved to Bothell in 1977. We purchased our first house. We paid less than $50,000 for that house. I think in today's dollars that would equate to roughly $200,000, maybe $250,000 in today's, accounting for inflation. The thing is, there's no houses even close for affordable at $250,000 in Bothell today. So obviously the housing environment has changed. Hindsight indicates suburban sprawl is harmful to the environment. Recent events, climate change, political dust-ups, high-income residents moving here from other states and countries, and ever more suburban sprawl have resulted in homes and apartments that are so expensive that middle-income earners, not to mention the lower-income folks, simply cannot afford to live in or near Bothell. The proposed code amendments in support of middle housing are critical to the future of our community. Homelessness is increasing, if not in Bothell. We've certainly seen it in the city of Seattle, and it's spreading outward to other communities, even Bellevue. Young people who are making earning a good living, some of them are still living with their parents. I have some friends who live just about a mile north of here. They have four children. All the children are in their 30s, and 2 of them are still living at home. One of them works here, and another one lives up in Burlington. In fact, the three of these children bought a house in Burlington. That's the closest they could find a house that they could afford to purchase. They felt the need to purchase a house. So we need to permit middle housing in all residential areas, require developers to include affordable housing in new developments, allow ADU permits with relaxed requirements, and I'm just about out of time. Thank you for your consideration, and please vote on this positively soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Westerbeck.
Thank you. Excuse me. My name is Kerry Westerbeck. I live in downtown Bothell. I'm here as a resident tonight. As an architect, a small developer, occasional contractor, and community advocate for many years, I've become really educated on missing middle housing, studying it for over 10 years since they first coined the term back in 2010. So I've been kind of in the weeds with this for a long time. And I was the kooky guy who used to give out the missing middle articles to council and planning commission back in 2016-17 when no one knew who it was, what the missing middle was. But I'm here, I can't touch a candle, hold a candle to the persuasive testimony tonight, so I'm here to just talk about a few things I've heard from people who are not in support of missing middle and set a few facts straight. First, let me set the record straight. By definition, missing middle housing is never 5 stories. There are signs around town describing projects that are 5 stories. Missing middle, by very definition, is 3 stories or less. So it's house scale. Our current Bothell Land Use Code allows houses up to 3 stories. So missing middle is a housing typology. It's about form. It's about scale. It's not about necessarily how much it costs. But that does end up being a component because you can fit more of them on a lot. These are house scale. They actually use the same setbacks, height limits, and bulk and height and dimension, and they can cover the same amount of space as a single-family house. So again, they fit into, they're designed to fit into a single-family neighborhood seamlessly. People have talked about infrastructure concerns a lot. Bothell Public Works and Engineering has evaluated the impact on the infrastructure if we pass this code amendment for missing middle housing, and concluded that it would be not an impact, would not be a problem. And that's again because these are house scale, have similar number of people living in them, say as similar to a large family with grown children living at home, as we often see kids in college and high school. Also, these projects will all go through the same sort of criteria project review that any project goes through in the city of Bothell. They'll have to show that they can meet the stormwater codes, sewer septic requirements, tree retention codes, sidewalk requirements, tree requirements, all that same stuff. It's also important to remember that you're still allowed to build a single-family home. All this does is expands options. This is not abolishing single-family zoning, as we've seen in some articles lately in the media, but it expands choice. And most Americans love more choice. So it provides choices and options. Got a lot more, but I'm going to keep it at that. I encourage you to vote yes on this immediately without delay. It was really dismaying to see that there was going to be months and months of process added to this. So thank you.
Thank you. Next up.
My name is Leah Westerbeck, and I'm a resident of Bothell. I've attended the North Shore School District my entire life, and I like living here. I'd like to have the option to stay and live in Bothell someday and live near my parents and extended family after graduation. But right now, the average house in Bothell costs $1 million, and that is out of reach for most people, and it will only get worse when my generation grows up and wants to buy a home if this continues. Unless you take the opportunity to pass the middle housing codes now and begin to make a change to Bothell that is more inclusive, equitable, affordable, diverse, and offers a wide variety of housing choices. I would love to see you pass this middle housing code sooner rather than later, because there is work to do and homes to build. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, please.
Hello, my name is Marco Morrison, and I'm a student at the University of Washington at Bothell. As a student of UW-Bothell, I seek a strong education of the UW standard. I have the luxury of affording, accommodations nearby, but many of my colleagues do not. There are many challenges in the modern academic journey. Tuition is at an all-time high, programs are becoming more and more selective, and that doesn't even begin to include struggles of more marginalized groups like students with dependents or those with disabilities. Physically being able to access the campus that one is paying tuition for should not be a concern of students that are already being spread thin in the current climate. And yet it is. Bothell's rapidly growing population leaves no room for students without a strong financial base, providing an unacceptable source of inequity among those merely seeking an education. Students may have to choose between paying for housing or paying for an education or even paying for food. And I'm sure that a room of leaders would have to make, or would hate to have to make, a choice like that. And I also know that if it comes down to doing away with food or housing or higher education is going to be the first to go. You have to survive. Middle housing would alleviate these challenges. UW-Bothell already has similar structures near campus for student housing, and I've tried to apply for 6 quarters now, and every single quarter, the housing is completely filled with 0 vacancy at all. Clearly, middle housing is sought after. It would be effective if, judging off the sample size of UW-Bothell of 5,000 students, it promotes population growth, especially for young citizens who would stay and potentially transition into single-family residencies in the future. And nobody should have to choose between housing and an education. And I hope the council understands and respects the difficult situation that the many diverse students of UW-Bothell are facing. And I hope that you will act with the good and the future of local residents in mind. Please vote yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Good evening, council and staff, and everybody who's been patiently and, enthusiastically listening to everybody's stories and anecdotes, because I find it really inspiring. And I'm glad I didn't write anything tonight because, volunteering last to speak, so many important points have already been made. I will say I'm a resident of Bothell, which is probably obvious, and I'm a mother to a West Hill first grader. I live with my partner and 2 children with my mother in her home. We have very unique circumstances, our arrangement. I don't know very many other people who get to live in a central area in a house with pretty affordable rent. Our rent is basically, we help her because she's also lives with disabilities. When I was starting to try to write something of what to say tonight, I honestly got pretty overwhelmed by all the reasons to pass this. One, it was like, do I talk about my family? Do I talk about my brother-in-law, who for months looked for houses in the area? His parents just bought a condo in Kenmore. We live in Bothell. He and his wife, after months of searching and getting outbid, which is not a unique story these days, found a house in Burien. Or do I talk about my cousin, and he's also 40 and college educated, all these things on paper my generation was told would be enough to at least own a home. Or my cousin, who's about 30, who just bought a house with his fiancée in Lake Stevens, who also spent months searching around Bothell and Linwood and found nothing. I have a huge family. We've been here for a few generations, and these are the 2 people who managed to buy something, and yet they were way out of the community in which they were seeking to live. And also, to be honest, climate change terrifies me. And I'm a freelance journalist. I cover parenting and culture, and so much of sprawl, so much of the effects of sprawl and the way we've been building have direct negative implications on parents. Aside from the fact that you're more isolated from your friends and family, like I just said, you invest so much money in driving everywhere. And the UN estimates that by 2050, there will be 1.5, I believe, billion climate refugees being displaced and seeking homes in all other parts of the world. And I want to be a place that's ready for that because it's already happening. And I want to be a place that's prepared for that and able to do it with grace and in a sustainable fashion. So please pass these, and also go up to 6plexes, get rid of parking. I would go even further with this, honestly, with what we're seeing. Thank you so much for your time and for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Ma'am, before you go, could you please give us your name for the record?
For that, Erin Sagan, thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, that's all I have.
Thank you, City Clerk.
Thank you.
Projected agenda discussion is next. Does council have an item they'd like to bring up? Seeing none, I'm going to call for a 10-minute break before we get into consent agenda and our agenda bills for the evening. It is 7:13. I will see you back here at 7:23.
Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
All right, welcome back. Next up is the consent agenda. I would love to have a motion to approve the balance of the consent agenda. Councilmember Dodd?
So moved. Second.
Thank you. We've got a motion on the floor to approve the balance of the consent agenda from Councilmember Dodd and a second from Councilmember Alders. Would anybody like to speak to the motion? Seeing none, City Clerk?
Please say yes or no when I call your name. Councilmember Zorns?
Yes.
Mayor Thompson?
Yes.
Councilmember Alders?
Yes.
Councilmember McNeil?
Yes.
Councilmember Menke?
Yes.
Councilmember Dodd?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Alcabra?
Yes.
Passes 7-0.
Thank you. Next up is our first agenda bill for the evening. It's Agenda Bill 23026, approval of construction contract with Johansen Construction Company, LLC for the North Creek Trail Section 4 Phase 2 and Phase 3 project and related budget amendment. City Manager?
Thank you, Mayor. It's not always that contracts and agreements are exciting and bring joy, but tonight is an exception. We have a few that I think there's a lot of important things that I know matter to the council and to the community. First up, there's actually two items. There'll be one presentation for them, both about North Creek Trail Section 4. And with that, I'm going to kick things over to our presenter, Yangqing Zhu, who's our Senior Capital Project Engineer, and I see she's joined at the table by Ryan Roberts, our Interim Capital Manager as well. Go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Yongqing Zhu, a Senior Capital Project Engineer, and I'm presenting AB 23-026 and AB 23-027 tonight, which is related to the North Creek Trail Phase 2 and Phase 3 projects.
Could you put the microphone just a little bit closer to your mouth? Awesome. Thank you.
First, let me start with AB 23-026, which is the construction contract. The North Creek Trail Section 4 will build an approximate 1,875 linear foot long and 10 feet wide paved trail between the Centennial Park driveway and the North Creek Trail Section 3 terminus, just west of Bothell Everett Highway. As showing on this map, Phase 1 is between 9th Avenue Southeast to Centennial Park driveway, and Phase 2 is between the Centennial Park driveway and the east of North Creek. Phase 3 is between east of North Creek and the North Creek Trail Section 3 terminus. To construct these projects, the city was awarded federal grant funds in the amount of $1,650,000 for the construction of Phase 2 and $900,000 for Phase 3. In addition, the state legislature provided state funds in the amount of $606,000 for Phase 2 and $490,000 for Phase 3. As a result of receiving these funds, and based on the engineering estimates, the city felt it would be able to construct Phase 2 and Phase 3 at the same time. Staff advertised for competitive bids for the projects for construction in December 2022 and specified two different bid schedules in the contract in order to define the work of each phase to address how expenditures would be applied toward each grant, as each grant and the legislative appropriation has to be spent on their respective phase. The goal was to get one contractor to build both phases by taking advantage of any economy of scale savings, as well as not having two contractors working simultaneously along the same stretch of roadway. Subsequently, as it related to AB 23-026, a competitive bidding procedure was forwarded for this construction project. On January 5th, 2023, the city received 9 bids, and upon reviewing the bids, it was determined that the lowest responsive and responsible bidder is Johansen Construction Company at $4,678,110.06. The total bid is less than the engineer's estimate at $4,824,741. The lowest apparent bidder was deemed to be non-responsive due to not meeting disadvantaged business enterprise goal, which is required by the federal funded projects. The North Creek Trail Section 4 Phase 2 and 3 projects are included in the adopted 2023 to 2024 budget. The total budgeted value of $5,889,000 would be sufficient to fund this item. However, despite the lower than expected total bid price, Phase 2 is $514,126 more than the engineer's estimate, and Phase 3 is $378,458.65 lower than the engineer's estimate. So in the case of Phase 2, the cost increase will make it necessary to increase the amount of city funds to fund the project, since there will be insufficient grant and legislative funds to cover the increase. While Phase 3, on the other hand, will not be able to take advantage of all the grant and the legislative funding due to the lower cost. To sum this up, in order to proceed with construction, the city will have to provide an additional $375,000 in real estate exercise tax for Phase 2 and 3, above the adopted 2023 and to 2024 budget amount of $817,000. The Finance Department confirmed that this additional REIT funding is available for the project. To potentially offset the increased REIT funding for Phase 2, staff are pursuing ways to reduce or avoid additional REIT expenditures, but recommends to moving forward with award of contract using REIT funds to complete the project. Upon award of the contract, the contract is expected to be mobilized in early spring 2023 and be completed by winter 2023. In conclusion, staff recommends to increase the project budget by $375,000 using REIT funds, and to then authorize the city manager to enter into a contract with Johansen Construction in the amount of $4,678,110.06 to build North Creek Trail Section 4 Phase 2 and 3 project. As for AB 23-027, staff recommends approval to enter a contract with AECOM for construction management services, providing for construction inspection, contract documentation, material testing, and geotechnical services in assisting the city's construction management staff. A consultant selection procedure was forwarded, and it was determined that AECOM was the best option in order to meet project requirements and the schedule. Having increased the project budget by $375,000 in REIT funds in the last agenda bill item, there is sufficient budget to fund this item. In conclusion, staff recommends to authorize the city manager to enter into a contract with AECOM in the amount of $282,497 to provide construction management services. And this is my presentation, and thank you.
Councilmember Alders.
Thank you for this presentation, and I am going to confirm what our city manager said. This is a very exciting contract to be brought towards in front of us, and I am really looking forward to North Creek being connected and being able to get through, especially by bike. So thank you very much for the work that you've put into this, and I'm really looking forward to supporting this. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the presentation. I look forward to seeing this project. I just wanted to ask, we're taking away REIT funding, extra REIT funding that we would have spent somewhere else. What would we deprioritize now that we're going to take this money to put it on this project, if at all? Basically, opportunity cost.
That was a very quick reaction.
Well, good evening, council members, Deputy Mayor. Kwon Wong, Finance Director. That is a good question. We have sufficient unallocated fund balance. In our 6-year CFP we just adopted, we have a projected fund balance of $5.3 million. So we are not asking the council to make choices at this point. We have sufficient funding in our unallocated balance to pay for this.
I'm really glad that we finally got to hear from you. So thank you for coming here. So this money has been just sitting there waiting to get spent.
We have been very conservative in our projection and also in our spending. But it is also my desire to bring before the City Council every budget needs that we are asking, so that you have a context, where we should be spending the money on.
I appreciate that.
I think this is a very well project that we will be able to afford.
Sounds great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Councilmember Zorns?
Yeah, I was going to ask a similar question, like if we spend this REIT money, can we still make our city hall payments? And it sounds like we can.
This is coming from the REIT 2 money.
Oh, the REIT 2.
So the city hall money is coming out of
REIT 1. Okay,
Correct.
good. And if we end up with REIT 3, who knows where we'll go. Another city hall. Oh, my goodness. One other question. Thank you for the presentation. I think at one point, all the numbers you were giving us, our heads started to spin a little bit. There lots of good facts, so thank you for that. I noticed that there was a closing comment on the agenda bill that there may be an increase needed in the future of $80,000 for monitoring the work that we've done. Is that right?
For the
It's on page 189.
for the mitigation monitoring services. Yes, yeah.
Okay. And what kind of things would you be monitoring for, like sediment or invasives, or what kind of things do you look for when you're monitoring it?
Yeah, that will include the planting invasive, like that's a wetland mitigation. So the planting,
Yeah, it's generally to make sure that whatever we plant, and whatever we restore in the wetland actually produces. It actually
Yeah,
grows.
Yeah, that's kind of important. So thank you for that. And I assume that this is not the only wetland that we have to prepare for checking on plantings. This is a normal thing that the city has to do for monitoring our wetlands. And
Yes, for every project that actually impacts a wetland or a part of it, there's a certain amount of wetland that you need to restore or to essentially enhance, to take whatever, to account for what you may have impacted.
yeah, well, I'm envisioning when that's all restored, people being able to take evening walks and hear wildlife off to the side over the road noise in the wetlands. So thank you for doing this. I mean, we've been talking about doing this for a long time. All of staff is smiling over the project, so it gives us a great encouragement, and thank you very much.
Councilmember Mankey.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have one question. It's a very practical question that some in the community may be thinking about. When the trail goes in, it means the sidewalk is going to be lifted out. So the question is essentially, what does the trail give us that a sidewalk doesn't currently give us? I'm guessing there's a wider path and space for people to cross. It's away from the street a little bit with a buffer, so it's a little bit safer. Are there any other benefits to having a trail there versus the sidewalks that's currently there?
The North Creek Trail is also connect to the existing North Creek. Currently, we are building Section 4. It's also connect to the Section 3, which is lead in, it's all the way to Snohomish County and Mill Creek. And so it's all, yeah. And yeah, as you mentioned, that it's also wider, like it's 10 feet wide paved the trail, which has bike and pedestrian shared. It's a pedestrian shared path. So yeah.
Yeah, you've pretty much mentioned a lot of the benefits out of it, and we really wanted to pull the bike lane or the bikes off the road, and that's the real benefit there as well.
That's great. I just thought of one additional question. What does the maintenance look like on our trails? I've ridden the whole stretch from the current ending point of the trail all the way down to its terminus in the south, but what's the general maintenance of the trail look like? And this specific part of the trail, I'm guessing it won't need to be repaid for 20, 30 years or longer?
Well, it's hard to say. I'm not so sure I'm the one to actually answer that question. I wish we had maybe perhaps see somebody from our operations department here tonight. I'm sure we might be able to get back to you on that particular.
Okay, that's great. I can follow up on the answer to that. Or it's like Steve's stepping up.
Oh, okay.
I'll take a shot at that. North Creek Trail, we have portions that are maintained by a combination of our Public Works Department and Parks, depending if you're talking about vegetation or pavement. So in those portions, when we started talking about our bike plan, we are looking at maintenance and how can we fund the maintenance of those things. There are portions that actually go through the business park that are supposed to be maintained by private, and those are a little more difficult because we have to work with the private business to address some of the tree roots or whatever requires maintenance there. So it is a combination of things to try to get all that done.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to this project being complete. I live in North End, so I will be using the trail once it's complete.
Councilmember Dodd.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I also live in the north part of the city, and I'm super excited. Just some context based on Councilmember Mankey's questions and probably anybody's questions. So I have biked from Canyon Park to Mill Creek, and I only do it alone. I have a bike that lets me throw my 7-year-old on the back as long as he doesn't wobble too much, because he likes to do that now. And I don't take him because the facilities are just not safe enough that I want my kid with me. So I'm very excited for this other option to get north, to kind of make it similar to when we want to bike to downtown Bothell from our home, where there are a lot more what I would consider safe for our situation facilities. So I think this is super exciting. I love also that we had the money like unallocated. We're not making a tough decision. We're just doing something exciting. It's going to benefit a lot of people and give them more options to get around. So yay.
I'm just really not sure about this whole bike thing. That was a joke for anybody who's new here. No, I'm super excited about this. I'm excited to see this project done. Good questions from the council members. I don't have anything to add. I just want to say thank you, and I would happily entertain a motion from council. Councilmember Alders?
So I have a question. If I can motion to both recommended actions at once, since they were presented at one time.
You absolutely can, if you would just specify the 2 agenda items. I think it's 8A and 8B on the agenda.
Okay, so I'm going to go off of the AB titles. I motion to approve the recommended actions on AB 23026 and AB 23027.
Second.
All right. And actually, Deputy City Attorney, should I read out the recommended action for the record? I usually do that, but it's long this time, so I'm asking.
I think that'd be appropriate, just for the record.
Perfect. I have a motion on the floor from Councilmember Alders and a second from Councilmember Dodd to move the recommended action for 8A, which is authorize the city manager to enter into a contract in substantially the same form as presented with Johansen Construction Company, LLC, for construction of the North Creek Trail, Section 4, Phase 2, and Phase 3 project in the amount of $4,678,110.06, and approve the ordinance to increase the project budget for 2023-2024 with $375,000 from REIT 2. And 8B, which is authorize the city manager to enter into a professional services agreement with AECOM Incorporated in the amount of $282,497 in substantially the same form as presented for construction management services for the North Creek Trail Section 4, Phase 2, and Phase 3 projects. Would anybody like to speak to the motion? Seeing none. City Clerk?
Thank you. Please say yes or no when I call your name. Councilmember Zorns?
Yes.
Mayor Thompson?
Yes.
Councilmember Alders?
Yes.
Councilmember McNeil?
Yes.
Councilmember Mankey?
Yes.
Councilmember Dodd?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Alcabra?
Yes.
Passes 7-0.
Thank you. And thank you, staff. Next up, we have Agenda Bill 23028, Comprehensive Plan 101. And I'm going to kick it over to City Manager and let him introduce it.
Thank you, Mayor. By way of background, you may recall that during the budget process, we talked about and highlighted some of the significant investments that were being recommended as we moved into this biennium. One of those investments was allocation of professional services money to support the city as we did work related to the development of the comprehensive plan update, 10-year update. Tonight, staff are here to talk about 2 contracts that are being recommended that cross 2 departments, Community Development and Public Works. The work has been, you'll hear about tonight, we've done an initial contract to do some scoping and make sure that we had a good plan moving forward to support. Tonight, council will be asked to amend those contracts to further move forward as we navigate through the upcoming months. I'm going to kick things over to Jason Greenspan, our Director of Community Development, to introduce the item and also introduce the presenters. Jason?
Thank you, Mr. Stannard. Good evening, Mayor Thompson, City Council members. Tonight we're here to provide a brief overview for updating the Imagine Bothell Comprehensive Plan, including fundamental plan requirements, our timeline, and the community engagement process. And as I'm saying these words, I realize this is the first time I've had an opportunity to talk to you about the comprehensive plan. And I don't know how much you've heard over the past 8 months or so, but I believe my predecessor last briefed you in April of last year. So tonight is really just the first of what I expect to be many times. We'll be here providing you updates, and especially on the community engagement process. To support our effort, we're requesting that the council approve contract amendments tonight for BERK and with Fair and Peers to help us complete the update process. And I'm here this evening with Kirsten Mant, who is serving as project manager for deliverables from BERK, and with Steve Morikawa, who's going to be responsible for managing our multimodal transportation element. Since the Growth Management Act was adopted by the legislature in 1990, Washington has required fast-growing cities like Bothell to prepare and periodically update their comprehensive plans to manage population growth. Our comprehensive plan is the centerpiece of our city's planning and articulates a series of goals, objectives, policies, actions, and standards to guide day-to-day decisions. Now, I was able to locate our past 3 plans. Our 2015 plan is on our website. It's also printed out here, so it's some nice bedside reading, yeah. 2004, as well as 1999, and I know we have numerous ones before that. These have provided the foundation for where we are today. And now, through the end of 2024, we're going to develop the next iteration of Imagine Bothell. Well, where is that going to take us? Well, we're not sure, but we know there are certain required plan elements that feature in every comprehensive plan. Land use, transportation, capital facilities, but we're also certain that we're going to cover new ground, where important issues related to equity, climate change, housing affordability, and human-focused mobility will take center stage through a participatory process with our entire community. We have planned for a variety of live and virtual platforms that will hopefully give us the broadest amount of input possible. And by working with regional agencies like the Puget Sound Regional Council, King County, and Snohomish County, we know that Bothell can remain a vibrant population and employment center that may indeed have up to 75,000 people over the next 20 to 25 years. I'm hoping that we can use the next 22 months, and yes, it's 22 months to get this done, to update our comprehensive plan to recognize our past and chart a sustainable course for the future. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Kirsten and Steve for an update.
Thank you, Jason. So I just want to give a brief overview of all the things we're hoping to cover tonight. Just a brief overview of what is a comprehensive plan, what is the framework, and how does the periodic update process work. We're going to go over the areas of focus and emphasis that we want to make sure end up in the plan, some of the things already discussed by Jason. We're going to go over a pretty high-level preliminary community engagement plan. We're still kind of working out the details with the consultant team, so we'll have some more information on that later on, probably next month. Steve's going to give us an overview of the transportation element, its components, and the new level of service work that they're doing, and then an overall estimated schedule for where we're hoping to get everything done in time. So what is the comprehensive plan? Jason gave us some really good background information on here. I also like to include this quote from MRSC. It's a really good, just one-sentence description of all of the things that a comp plan does and how that influences what staff does, what elected officials do, and all of things involved in that. The goal of this little infographic I stuck in there was just to give a visual representation of how the comp plan directly influences what happens on the ground. So whether that be public development that we do or private development, and the 3 sort of main pools in between are Bothell Municipal Code, our capital budget and projects, and our design and construction standards. Those all need to be consistent with the plan, and they all go into creating what happens. The Growth Management Act is really the foundation for all of this work. It was adopted in 1990, the goal of which is to try and prevent the continuation of sprawl. That occurs mostly through the establishment of the urban growth boundary. Basically, everything inside the boundary is where we want to concentrate development and growth. Everything outside, we want to try and reserve for things like agricultural lands, rural areas, managed forests, preserved forest, things like that. It also establishes who has to plan and who doesn't necessarily have to plan. As you can see from the map, there are there's counties within the state that have to plan and choose to, and have to. There's ones that don't have to plan and choose to anyhow, and then there's some that do choose to opt out, but they do have to be consistent with some other requirements. The Growth Management Act has 14 goals currently, and I won't go through all of them at once here, but just gives you an idea of just how broad the GMA is and all of the things that it touches. Puget Sound Regional Council, they're a really important component of this work. They are the regional planning body for the Puget Sound area. There are 4 counties within which they cover. We are in 2 of those. They create the regional growth plan, which is the most up-to-date version being Vision 2050, and that establishes the multi-county planning policies. That's kind of the big part of it. In terms of the framework for the update for GMA compliance, which is one of the big pieces of this, it's not the only piece, but obviously it's very important. Again, the basis of all of this is the GMA, PSRC, and their multi-county planning policies, or MPPs is a little easier to say. And then both King and Snohomish County have to adopt their own county-wide planning policies, and these have to be consistent with the MPPs. Our comp plan has to be consistent with all of that, and our regulations as well. And then all of that filters down again to the projects we see. There's sort of 8 major areas of focus we've established that we both want to do and have to do and also really think we need to do as a part of this work. So the primary, like we've been mentioning, is meeting our GMA requirements, making sure that we can get the plan adopted. Part of that is accommodating for growth allocations. We also want to make sure that we're doing a really inclusive and robust engagement and visioning process. That's going to be a lot of the work we're doing over the spring and the summertime, although also throughout the entire life of the project. Like I mentioned, we're going to be adopting a new transportation level of service. That's some of the early work that's happening this year. We do want to make sure that we're, again, with the robust and inclusive engagement process, incorporating diversity, equity, inclusion into the entire plan itself. This is both something that we want to do and think we need to do. It's also an increased area of focus for the CPPs and the MPPs. So all of the planning policies, we need to show compliance and consistency with our placing a greater emphasis on racial equity and DEI work. This is kind of the fun part, is making the document more user-friendly. We want to make it kind of more pretty, for lack of a better term, more engaging. We want to make sure that the residents feel like they have some ownership over the document, that it's something they could pick up and look at it and mean something. So that's something we're pretty excited about. We're going to be adding a climate change element as well as adding climate change goals and policies throughout the plan. We want to make sure that it's both called out in a very strong way, but also integrated into everything in a way that makes sense by topic. And then finally, we're also looking forward to working on an implementation, either element or plan, something where we can really show how our goals and policies are actionable and feasible. And that's going to be more sort of like a 5-year term, because we have some new reporting requirements through the comp planning process. We want to make sure we're setting staff up for success when it comes time to do that reporting. So integrating that into our implementation plan in terms of timelines is going to be something we're working on. For the draft engagement plan right now, we have kind of 4 major buckets of what we're looking to do. The primary one that we're also quite excited about is our online engagement tool, Citizen Lab. It's going to be managed by our community engagement specialist, Sarah Frost, in the CD department. And this will allow us to create engagement efforts throughout the entire life of the project that allow us to be really nimble in those efforts and react to what we heard from prior efforts and change what types of activities we're doing, what topics we're covering. So that will be a really great resource for us. We're working right now to start putting together focus groups. The 2 primary topics for those are going to be climate change and racial equity, and we're hoping to have folks ready to hold some of those meetings this summer. Another big piece of the engagement this summer, as well as outside of it, is really meeting people where they're at events that are already really well attended, and also well attended by a diverse slice of the population. So one of the ones we're focusing on is summer nights. We know those are really popular, really well attended. It'll give us an opportunity to bring some topics there, talk to people, get people engaged that are already excited to be down near City Hall. And then for the more kind of traditional engagement, we want to do 2
in-person open houses. One will probably be sometime around late summer, early fall in support of the engagement we're doing over the summer. And then one will be probably early 2024 when we have draft elements and documents to show people and get feedback on that. For staff project progress updates, so we are currently looking at doing monthly in-person check-in meetings with Planning Commission. Right now, those are just going to be updates on where we're at with the process, since we're not quite into the kind of more topical areas of work, but moving into more topic by topic. So one session we'll just talk about the housing element, for example. And then for council, right now we're looking at wanting to do a quarterly in-person check-in with staff reports provided at a much more frequent basis, probably something like monthly reports. And that will include, whatever happened with Planning Commission discussion as well. So you'll be kept abreast of those discussions. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Steve Marcella.
Good evening. One of the first things I want to do is remind you that past fall, you authorized us to hire a transportation supervisor to get a lot through this. And what I want to do today is introduce you to Ryan Thierry. He's our new transportation supervisor, and you will be seeing a lot of him. My goal is to have him sitting in this seat instead of me in the long run. So the update of the transportation element is really exciting. There's a lot to do in a short amount of time. We've started working with Fair and Peers, a transportation consultant, on multimodal level of service. So MMLOS, you're going to hear that term a lot. And that's kind of graphically depicted on the screen. You can see different layers of transportation system modes, like autos, trucks, or freight, so to speak, transit, pedestrians, bikes. And think about it as an integrated system. They're each a layer in themselves, but they interact with each other. So currently we measure level of service, our capacity of our transportation system, only by vehicle capacity. So what we want to do is extend that to all the other different types of modes of transportation. That's the multimodal level of service, MMLOS. So as we make progress on this, we'll be touching base with you, the Planning Commission as well as the Council. And our first such touch point will likely be talking to you about MMLOS later this spring. So we're going to participate in the public and stakeholder engagement process that Kirsten runs as the whole comp plan. The transportation element, excuse me, will just be a part of that and kind of seamlessly look like a part of the whole element. But since it's a large amount of work, again, we have a different consultant working on it. Typically, we do foundation work, which is existing conditions. We describe the system we have today. And again, that'll be all different modes. What we'll also do is start developing our model based on current year. We'll take traffic counts for 2024, and we've taken some in 2023. And essentially what we'll do is calibrate the model so it basically the output puts out what we currently see. That's kind of a calibration process. What we'll do also is when we develop this network is essentially use that model with all the network connections. And typically what we do is take the PSRC model, which is region-wide, and we'll make a finer network where we need it. So as an example, in our downtown area, the PRC model may not have some of the streets that we think are important, and we will put that into the model. And then we will forecast the land use that is being proposed. There could be a couple different alternatives that we study, and it's essentially a 20-year forecast. We're also going to do things and participate and do our part for climate change. A lot of that is greenhouse gas, resiliency. So we have more flooding because the climate, it's raining. We have more 100-year floods than every 100 years now. We have things like earthquakes, and we want to make sure our emergency routes and our key arterials are resilient. Safety is going to be a big thing that we look at. We do this a couple ways. The old way to do it is kind of look at where accidents have occurred, but the new way is to kind of look at what's called a safe system. So not only do you document where accidents have occurred, but you look at your network and you see where there is greater risk for accidents. So we're going to start looking at safety in a different way. We're going to do our transportation policies. We'll look at our old policies, make sure we review them all, refresh where we need, create new policies, or draft new policies where we have to. a big part of this for transportation is coming up with a project list. And what that means is when you look at all the different systems, you're going to have projects that you want to complete to help complete the systems, as well as safety projects, and could be things like transit as well. So we'll develop those lists. We'll have to prioritize those lists. We'll have to cost the projects. And then we'll have to come up with what we can afford to do in that 20-year planning period that would support the growth. So it is a pretty big lift in that sense of defining and getting down to that detail in terms of projects. We're going to participate in the SEPA along with the rest of the comp plan. And the last two items are not really comprehensive plan per se, but they follow. So sometimes standards need to be updated, just like when we did the bike plan, and when we adopt the bike plan, there'll be new design standards. So you have to update those things. And then the last thing we'll do is come up with a list of concurrency projects that as growth occurs, we can charge transportation impact fees to help pay for growth. So it's really hard to kind of look at all that and figure out how it's going to be put together. So this is kind of my shot at how to look at it. So the first thing is to, again, keep in mind the layers and that we're doing a multimodal system. And it's a layer of different transportation modes that kind of interact with each other. So that's the first thing you should keep in mind. We have priorities. We've talked to, as we've gone through the scoping process and as we go through the broader public process, some of these priorities might be tweaked or added on or changed a little bit. But what we're hearing is mobility, the ability of people to get around, climate change, environment, resiliency, safety, economics, and that means freight as well, being able to move products to where they're needed, sustainability, maintenance, and equity. So how does that work? There's a couple of things that, like safety, it'll have a safety plan and a safety analysis all by itself. But there's also a lens that you look through when you're picking your projects or developing your project list. You keep all these things in mind and you have a process you go through. So as an example, rather than going straight to a capital project, we may look at programs that get people out of their cars first. So that might be less expensive, more sustainable, economically smarter to do. So that's the lens we would look at in going through and developing our network. And in the policies update, like I said, we will look at all our existing policies, refresh them, update, and create more policies as needed. So in terms of timeline, this is the overall timeline, not just the transportation one. We did start scoping work early, but we also feel like as we go through the public process, the scoping work, you know, as we get tighter and tighter, there still are some tweaks and things that we may have to do. We're trying to get our contract awards. This particular amendment, we have some small starter contracts because we needed to get started in the interest of time. We don't have a lot of time, but this contract amendments are very important for us to keep moving along. We're going to do the MMLOS methodology early up, and we're going to, again, probably come back and talk to you in the spring about this. We're going to have regular city council updates. We're going to have regular planning commission updates, and this may take a couple of forms. They may be in memo form, they may be in person, or a combination thereof. One of the things that is very important to understand is there's a kind of a timing element to this. So community development is going to talk about land use, but once they get through land use, then transportation has to come along and do their thing to make sure that the transportation network can support it. So there's a kind of a pecking or a process order that has to be done. So our land use alternatives is going to happen pretty quick. So by this, excuse me, by this summer, we should have kind of alternatives laid out, and the transportation group will essentially start testing it and developing a network to make sure that we understand, can we support the growth in the areas, or how we've laid out the land use. So major elements, the plan itself will be done toward the end of 2023, all elements, which is very, very quick and a lot of work to do. Transportation element, unfortunately, kind of follows a lot of these things. So we will be doing a lot of our testing work in the early fall, trying to catch up with all our project identification in late fall. The concurrency analysis impact fee is, again, not quite comp plan exercise it typically follows. So we'll do that in 2024. And like I said, the draft plan essentially will be complete kind of toward the end of 2023 and early 2024. And we have to run through a SEPA process, which consists of a draft EIS as well as a final EIS. And then we need to go through an adoption process, which means getting and talking to the Planning Commission as well as the council, which takes time. Community engagement will be happening all the time as we go through, and it could happen in different forms at different stages of completion of the plan itself. Oh, me, sorry. So staff is requesting council approve the contract amendments with BERK and Fur and Pierce to complete the 2024 Comprehensive Plan periodic update. I think that's our presentation, and we'd be happy to try to entertain questions.
Councilmember Zorns?
Sitting here taking notes that I want to ask and comment on, and I'm all over the paper. So my apologies. Thank you for the presentation. I watched Planning Commission, and I'm like, I've seen that slide before. It's great to come back and look at it again. I hate to be looking at it just first pass through without seeing it again. And I'm looking forward to a monthly report. When I saw that Planning Commission was going to be dealing, looking at this monthly, I was like, what about us? So thank you for including us in monthly reports. And then Steve, you've mentioned climate change and greenhouse gases and earthquakes, which is really important. And you don't need any more cooks in the kitchen. But something that I look for is I have enough of a chemistry background, and I have major chemistry majors in my family to know that water is a place where a lot of chemical reactions happen for creating either new compounds or warming the temperature of the water. So I will be keenly looking to see how we're addressing stormwater in this process. And thank you for the comprehensive list on multimodal transportation level of service. Looks like you got everybody covered. I think often we forget that we need to get goods and services from one part of the town to the other. And all we need is one shortage of toilet paper that everybody starts to realize it's kind of important to get the goods where they need to be. And then the other thing, and it's my last comment, when I have conversations with the community, they often feel that if they come and they look at it once or they comment once, it's like kind of like one and done. And I hope the community understands that this is an intense process and they need to stay engaged in the process from wherever they enter in the process to the completion. Because council needs to hear sometimes. I'm not speaking for the current council, I'm speaking for past councils and myself, maybe needs to hear community input more than once for it to sink in and dive in and have more of a conversation. So not so much a comment to you, but the community at large, please stay engaged. Wherever you dive in, stay engaged and help us see this to the finish line. Thank you for the presentation. It's going to be a busy year and a half, 2 years? Yeah.
Deputy Mayor.
Too slow. Thank you so much for the presentation. I mean, I know it's really high level. I have detailed questions that I can send. Some detailed questions, some questions I probably should ask right now. Thank you for, you answered my question about the project progress, so which is great, it'll be good. And then I'm sure I will personally be watching the Planning Commission so that to Council Members Zorns' point, like I don't want it to be the first time I see things, especially for such an important process that we're going through. The community engagement plan, are we going to have an opportunity? I know you presented the high level. Are we going to have an opportunity to go into have how the details we don't want to micromanage. I know we're not supposed to be micromanaged, but it'll be good. It's like, here's who we selected, here's what we're going to do and all that stuff.
Yeah, we will be finalizing a draft public participation plan that focuses on the different ways we're going to engage, like we had mentioned, the online portal, meeting people where they're at, the open houses, to show that we're trying to cover every different way that as a community member you may want to gain trust of government and be able to work with your government and communicate effectively. So yes, there will be an opportunity to have a look at the public participation plan.
All right, thank you. Appreciate that. In the agenda, I didn't see Urban 3 mentioned or incorporation of any Urban 3 findings that we, it's been, how long have you been here? A year or so ago, year and a half or so ago, we got an Urban 3 presentation. Is that going to be incorporated at all in this plan, especially since it's a 20-year plan? You can think about it and answer later.
Yeah, I think I have to give myself a little bit of a brush up on that presentation itself. I think it was probably the middle of last year, and understand what their findings were and how to incorporate that, especially in the economic element.
Thank you. I have here questions, like I have page number, whatever, and then I address it. So I'll just send those in an email. I think it'll just be better. The biggest point is safety analysis. We talk about vehicles and all that, or measuring collisions, but what about the near misses? Sometimes you don't need to have a collision, but it could be a dangerous enough situation. They happen a lot. Nothing is recorded on paper, but then how do we track that?
Yeah, so that's a great point. And again, that's the move away from just using past data and actually looking at your network and doing a risk analysis and seeing where things meet. So where your bike meets the vehicles, those are risk points, and assessing those things based on how those things typically perform in systems and things. So you're looking more at a system rather than just previous data, I think is what. And so because we're doing that, hopefully we're being proactive, not responsive to something that already happened. So that's kind of a new approach, and that's one of the things that we're gonna be doing.
I appreciate that, and that will be part of the updates that will happen throughout the year. Then,
yes, I think
the conversations.
We have to kind of coordinate what's going to be lined up in each of our updates, so we haven't quite done that. So we don't know exactly the timeline, but I can tell you safety is one of those things we can do now, and we have to do as much as we can up front because we don't have very long. So I think you're going to hear about safety sooner than later, probably.
Sounds good. The other big point, sorry, I know I said I'm going to ask questions, but I will ask. Because I was looking and I have it highlighted here. It says, page 320 on our packet, it says there will be three future year scenarios. It wasn't clear to me, is it only 3 years or is it only 3 scenarios over the next 20 years?
Yeah, so we'll do an existing analysis that, again, calibrates our model. Then we will use that model, we will use the land use, and we will essentially within Bothell project out what kind of person trips are being generated for all the different modes. We will use the PSRC model, which will be kind of tweaked and updated to get it to the future year as well. We will look at we'll look at a no build, essentially if we don't do anything, and then probably 2 alternatives we can study from a transportation point of view. And that will be a 20-year future look.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Dodd.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. You made it sound exciting, which I feel like doesn't always happen when people talk about comprehensive plans. I'm super excited about the thought of public engagement happening where people are at. That's really exciting. I think all of us live in specific neighborhoods. A lot of us have lived in our neighborhoods for a long time, and we hear from our neighbors on things. And the people that come talk to us can tend to be the same people. Sometimes we get new people and we're all very excited. We're like, oh, there's a new person out there. Somebody go say hi. But meeting people where they're at means we're going to get people who either aren't comfortable coming in, can't come in, on a Tuesday night, or, just don't feel empowered. But if we have a booth at summer nights and someone says, oh, hey, I have some thoughts about this, like it's a great way to draw people in. So I love that idea. And just as Councilmember Zorns said, the chance to have a lot of conversations throughout the process because it's an evolving plan. So that's very exciting. I just wanted to shout that out. I wonder if part of the outreach is going to have a way to show people kind of why this matters to them. And I don't know what that would look like necessarily, but like even just as simple as taking, an example resident from each generation, including whatever's after Gen Z, like the kids people are having right now, right? And how the comprehensive plan could affect their life in Bothell. So kind of tell people the story of like, this is what this does, and this is how it's going to affect you or your kids or your parents or whatever that is. We heard from some teachers tonight about their students living in Bothell, as they graduate. And I think it's hard to like Vision 2050, and I'm thinking like, okay, it's March, I gotta think about March, like it can be hard to wrap your mind around that sometimes. So I think selling that to people is really important, with nice graphics and fonts and things that make you wanna read it, right? Maybe not a binder. I'm kidding. I love that idea and I love the creativity there. I think, Rami, you had a question that made me have a question, and then I talked too much. Near misses, that's what it was. So you hear a lot about them. I mean, you can open up Nextdoor or Facebook or whatever have you and find all kinds of things. Is there a way to report that? And I don't necessarily mean call the police department and report it, right? Because that's not always appropriate necessarily, but kind of a concern tracking mechanism that people can use so that instead of just ranting out into the universe and having that slowly die down in relevance in search results, like some kind of way where we can just say like, hey, we've gotten 10 complaints over the last 6 months about this intersection. Maybe we should check it out. Because coming from like software engineering, I can build a tool and tell people how to use it, but how they use it is going to vary a crazy amount, a frustratingly crazy amount. So hearing from people who are out there using our facilities, I think is super important. And I wonder if we're missing that kind of feedback where something almost happened and then we don't actually hear about it until something happens.
I think we can do a better job, but you'd be surprised how much input on that we do get.
Okay.
We do have a traffic engineer in our operations side that spends a significant part of their time essentially responding to those.
Is there like, oh, sorry.
Yeah, so we do have a pretty good feel on some of the areas and concerns, but during this comp plan, sure. I think that would be great to kind of get people to tell us more about areas of concern and things like that.
And to add to that, the online platform, Citizen Lab, gives us the opportunity to be creative, and we can ask those types of more qualitative questions. We may not have data that we can rely on, but if we ask questions like what is an area where you feel safety can be improved, what intersection is a problem for you, there may be ways for us to start capturing that, even though we don't have an incident necessarily to rely on.
Yeah, that would be awesome. And as far as reporting near misses, is that, and I don't know that you'll have an answer to this, but is that sort of not advertised, but if you go to like the Bothell website and you're like, I have something to say, is it easy to find where you can submit that, or do you have to know I need to talk to the traffic engineer and send him an email?
That's what I would have to check. I'm not quite sure the process. I think there's a couple ways it can be done, so that's something I will check back in.
Okay, thank you. That was it. Thank you very much.
Councilmember Aldrichs.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to start out by saying just how grateful I am that this upcoming comprehensive plan is going to include the DEI, climate change, and implementation elements. I think that that will very much strengthen the planning that we're doing over the next 20 years. And that kind of relates to one of my questions is the amendment to the contract shows a pretty significant increase in cost. And there's a lovely graph on page like 220 or 275 in our agenda packet and 276 that sort of outlines, I think, where those predicted additional expenditures are coming from. How much of those are related to these additional elements that we're including in the comprehensive plan that maybe that are above and beyond what GMA requires of us?
Scrolling to that page in the agenda, bear with us.
It's the let me read the title. It's BERK Consulting, the 2023 hourly rates, and it has the color coding. I think that means that those are like where the projected estimates have been changed, perhaps.
Yeah, I'm thinking that we initiated a small contract to get the work done based on the timeline that we're at. And I'm not quite following the color coding in here, but maybe Kirsten can add to where we're starting to refocus and where those larger items are starting to come into play now versus what we started off with.
Yeah, so the split in what was covered in this, the small contract versus the overall contract is more kind of a chronological thing than a topical thing. So we were really wanting to get, I think as Steve mentioned, we wanted to get something under contract so we could really get going on some of the early work, like the early engagement efforts and the climate change component, especially since we're on some stricter timelines for that because of the grant funding we got from Department of Commerce to do that work. So yeah, that was really the goal of the initial contract, was to just get something underway so we could get this work going as fast as we could before being able to bring this contract.
Okay, that's helpful. So these additions are really to flesh out and complete the work that is required, and the beginning was just sort of a getting started. Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you. I do want to say that I'm good with the quarterly updates, and I do appreciate that staff will be updating us monthly. I'm really looking forward to those. And yeah, like Councilmember Dodd said, you've made this sound like an exciting process. Each of these areas are really vital to our community, and people have feelings about them. And to be able to be involved in that process and informed is really meaningful, which leads me to the community engagement piece. You mentioned Citizen Lab. I totally looked up on the website to see what they were like. I'm wondering, can at some point you provide us what like a possible demo of what that might look like for us, so that we can get a sense of how, like, all the bells and whistles that it has for our community to participate, and I'm just really grateful that we will have the opportunity to see you guys out at Summer Nights and probably the 4th of July Parade and some of the other activities that we're having out in the public. Will that also include the markets that occur out here on the plaza?
I would say that there's a pretty good chance that we'll probably integrate that. Sarah Frost, who is the one kind of managing Citizen Lab, is really deeply involved in a lot of those markets and those activities already. So she's kind of our resource for telling us what are some of the things that we should be making sure that we hit up when we're engaging with the public over the summer especially. And then speaking to the Citizen Lab portal itself, that is something she is working on building out right now. I'm really hoping sometime in potentially March or maybe in April, we can come with a presentation just on community engagement after we've finalized the plan with our consultant that they're drafting for us now, and when we have the website kind of up and going, and we can give you a much more detailed overview of everything.
That's great. Well, I'm excited to see it and to hear the updates. So thank you very much for the presentation tonight.
Yeah.
If you do want to see an example of Citizen Lab at work, City of Seattle is using it right now for their comp plan. So you can navigate there and have a look and see what the bells and whistles are that they opted into.
Okay. Well, we are nowhere near in size in Seattle, so maybe are not going to be investing quite that much, but thank you.
Anybody else, or is it my turn? All right.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I remembered one more question. So everyone I think so far has said, I have more questions that I will send via email. I would beg for some kind of question tracker that we can all go log on and check throughout this process, because we tend to think of the same questions, right? Or there are people who are really good at certain areas where I'm like, dang, I would have never thought of that. Like Jean with stormwater right away. I was like, stormwater, yes. So just, I'd love to see everyone else's questions without doing my own public records request. So I don't know what that would look like and all that, but that would be awesome. Thank you.
The budget question trackers ruined us for every other subject. Sorry. Anybody else? All right. I have a couple of questions. While I click back to them, I just want to reiterate what Kyle said earlier. This has been a really encouraging, fun evening with all of our favorite topics involved in it. First, confession, multimodal level of service is a lot more engaged and more difficult to develop than I feel like I realized back in the day. Aaron, I'm saying that like halfway for you, just so you know. Mea culpa. Is there not a multimodal level of service that we can steal? Are people not doing this?
Yes, we can steal. We want to steal appropriately. So there are different, it's not just creating a level of service, it's tailoring it to what our desired outcome is. It's also how you measure it, because once you create a level of service, you have to measure it. So as development comes in, you want to make sure, that's what concurrency is. Making sure as growth occurs, you have the transportation system. There are some larger agencies that have a very complicated way of doing it that you, well, from the city point of view, resource-wise, we may not want to do it. And for a city our size, we may not need to do it at that level. So we're trying to right-size it. So we're trying to make sure we capture the priorities, the multimodal systems that we want, and then we want to right-size it for Bothell. So yes, we are not inventing the wheel. We're trying to steal the good parts and put it together so it fits right.
Cool. If we were inventing the wheel, that'd be okay with me too, though. I wanted to reiterate what the deputy mayor said about Urban 3. The reason I think we brought them in is because we wanted to use the comp plan as a vehicle to become more financially resilient over time, both in land use and transportation. And I would love to be able to tell that story to the community as part of the outreach. And as we do that work, really appreciate the approach on safety and doing that in a way that isn't just like, hey, where have the accidents been? Because like we've probably all seen that graphic online, like World War II pilots came back and they cataloged like everywhere they got shot. And then they reinforced it where they got shot without realizing, oh, wait, the places that it didn't get shot, those were the planes that didn't come back. So I appreciate that. Councilmember Dodd mentioned kind of telling the story of why. And this isn't something I had thought about before in terms of like the comp plan, but actually I think this could be really important. You know, we have a lot of people who have spent a lifetime in Bothell, and as it has grown, their perception is that it has gotten worse. And oftentimes it's a really simple assumption and easy to make and logical to say that like growth has made things worse. And as we talk about changing the way we grow, I'd love to be able to communicate to the community that we are trying to solve the same problem that they see. Like, we care about the same things that they do, even if we are taking a different tack. And the last question is just the near misses, and we have an engineer that deals with some of those areas of concern and incidents. Do we keep a record of all those, and like, do we have all of that?
Again, I think I would have to check how he's tracking all that. Yeah.
Cool. It's not something I want to see. If we've got somebody doing that much time, it seems like that's good information.
Yeah.
And that's really all I've got. And I think we have a motion necessary and a recommended action. Councilmember Dodd?
I move the recommended action.
Second.
All right, I have a motion on the floor from Councilmember Dodd and a second from Councilmember Alders to authorize the city manager to execute the following two amendments. Amendment number 1 with BERK in the amount of $654,892, and amendment number 1 with Fair and Piers in the amount of $841,455. Would anybody like to speak to the motion? Seeing none, City Clerk?
Please say yes or no when I call your name. Councilmember Zorns?
Yes.
Mayor Thompson?
Yes.
Councilmember Alders?
Yes.
Councilmember McNeil?
Yes.
Councilmember Menke?
Yes.
Councilmember Dodd?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Alcabra?
Yes.
Passes 7-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Looking forward to continuing to do this over the next few years. And I really liked working with BERK the last time we had them in there, so I'm excited they're coming back. Yeah, we're going to do this. So next up is the study session. And we're going to break for 10 minutes. And we'll break for 12 minutes. It's 8:33. We will see you at 8:45 in room 107 over there. And the meeting will, however, be streamed in chambers. For those who are attending virtually, please follow the Teams link on the agenda or continue to view the meeting on YouTube or BCTV.
And Mayor, I'll just highlight that we have, the only person on Zoom right now is a staff member, so.
Perfect. I don't have Zoom
The
up.
community will follow us.
Sounds good.
All right, it is time. Wait, are we okay? We're streaming on Teams? Awesome. Next up is Agenda Bill 23030. It's a study session. Is consideration of the proposed 2023 planning docket. Kyle.
Thank you, Mayor. The one thing that we'll all have to get used to is the lack of needing a microphone in this room. So I'll say for the benefit of the council and for our audience that the microphones are built into this room, actually. And so when you speak, people will hear you. So that's a good thing to keep in mind. And I hope that, again, in the spirit of keeping the study session conversational, it also facilitates the ability to do that. So tonight we are having our first study session in a slightly revised format, the ability to, again, have conversation back and forth. And our study session is focused on the consideration of the proposed 2023 planning docket. Here tonight with us is our Community Development Director, Jason Greenspan, once again, and our Deputy Director, Ashley Mitchell. So I'll turn it over to them.
So tonight we're talking about the 2023 planning docket. The City Council is being asked to review and provide direction for 4 code and comprehensive plan amendment requests from private property owners. This year's docket looks different than last year's docket and previous years. And so what we are looking at doing moving forward is instituting a yearly and a 5-year plan to better manage our time and focus our project priorities. And then just bringing this docket to you all for decision as the code requires. So we've initially reviewed the request, formed recommendations, and balanced the proposals with other workload included in the yearly and 5-year plan. The docket also includes items that were previously deferred by the comp plan by City Council to the 2024 comprehensive plan amendment. So when you look at the list, there are things that in previous dockets you all forwarded to the comp plan, and so we've captured those. And then we're going to be talking about 3 new requests and then an existing request that we're going to try to very simply explain what we're asking you to do with it because it can be slightly confusing. So essentially, the Bothell Municipal Code Title 11 allows any person to suggest amendments to the comprehensive plan, sub-area plans, or development regulations through this process. The applications for the following year must be received by October 31st. So we received all the applications by October 31st, 2022 for 2023. And then we spend time reviewing those and determining what is the recommendation for council, how much time do we anticipate these taking, and what are our other priorities for projects in that time plan. So there's a 3-step process for these amendments. Ultimately, at the final decision comes to City Council. So this is the first decision of City Council, but not the final decision. So essentially, the amendment process, there's 3 steps. The first is docketing. So you all get to inform city staff of which of these amendments you would like us to move forward with. We then would go and analyze these. So we would look at our sub-area plans, we'd look at our comprehensive plan, we'd look at our zoning code. We advertise to the community if they're site specific and have additional conversations and then determine, does this make sense? What should we recommend to Planning Commission? What should we recommend to City Council? And then finalize some of those recommendations. The final step is that it would be reviewed by Planning Commission. They would make a recommendation to City Council, and then you all would have the final decision authority in this. So we're going to jump right into the requests. The first is the Dirt Lord proposal. So we essentially named these over after the property owner or applicant. This is located on Woodinville Drive in the Brickyard Road and Queens Gate sub area. So this request is to rezone the site from office and light industrial to an unspecified residential zone. And I believe the request is actually to add a residential designation. So we allow sites to have multiple zoning designations. Based on the location of the site, surrounding uses, so it's pretty much to the west and then further to the east in Woodinville, surrounded by industrial zones. On the other side of the road, there are some residential zones. But based on that location of the site, the surrounding uses, and the lack of
We know.
Yes. It's too late. From the applicant, staff does not recommend moving forward with the proposed zoning changes. There are concerns about the proximity of nearby industrial uses and those impacts on the residential site. The applicant has not indicated what zone they find appropriate for the site. And in the application, the applicant states that the existing zoning and shoreline jurisdiction prevent development of the site and that the site is more developable as a townhome project. The applicant has not provided compelling supporting materials to further this assertion. And so staff recommends that that City Council decline to move forward with this application. But if City Council does choose to move forward with this application, staff requests or recommends that it be examined through the comprehensive planning process due to staffing availability and the need for additional analysis to determine the appropriate zone for the site and potentially the appropriate zone for the area. So case law really supports that you don't just zone a site specifically for one use without really looking at the surrounding area. So there needs to be compelling reasons why that site should have a different designation than the surrounding area. And so that process would probably be better accomplished potentially through the comprehensive plan, which may result in a new designation or determining that it's zoned appropriate. So the second request is the Pierce proposal. This is in the West Hill sub-area. It generally includes parcels bordering 4th Avenue Southeast and 7th Avenue Southeast south of 240th Street. The applicant is seeking a rezone for, when we spoke with them, a larger area, but they only have site control of a few of those sites. So their request is to rezone from R9600 to R7200. I also wanted to add, and it's on the docket list that was provided in your packet, that past year several applications have been made in the area to rezone the site. Council has deferred those to the 2024 comprehensive plan. So we're already looking at some rezonings in this area based on previous requests. The area is also immediately adjacent to the future Red Barn Village sub-area, which is being completed through the comprehensive plan update. So there's potential for maybe like a transition zone here or something to support future light rail coming down Bothell Everett Highway. The area is also encumbered by Little Swamp Creek. And so staff believes that there are additional need to find ways to protect the stream buffer and prevent unplanned development. So one thing we've talked about a lot with this site is potentially a different zone would be appropriate, but also we want to make sure that it's not piecemeal development so that we have these long, narrow lots and then one gets developed, one doesn't. Finding ways to make sure that it's more cohesive, and then also because it's encumbered with critical areas, we also want to find ways to not have it result in several reasonable use permits. See if there's ways that the density could be condensed to one area or something to protect the ecological function of that stream. Since additional sub-area planning will be done through the comprehensive plan in order to be formally designated as a countywide planning center, we think that there's opportunity to combine this into the comprehensive plan. There may be more opportunity beyond R7200, but we want to make sure that through the comprehensive planning process, we're looking at this area as a whole, looking at the previous requests, and really analyzing what's appropriate for this zone or this sub area, and how can we protect the stream while encouraging development in an area that's going to be pretty attractive. It's close to downtown, it's close to Canyon Park, and it's also going to be very close to future light rail, or not light rail, sorry.
You keep saying that, so that threw me off.
Sorry. I worked in Linwood too long. It's bus rapid transit. It's Swift here.
So excited when you say light rail, we're just like, oh,
Really? Sorry.
tell me more.
Yeah, it's infecting. No one's talked to me about light rail. It's just like my brain just wants to say it.
My brain wants to say it too.
Okay. So I'm not making any progress. So we don't recommend moving forward with them separate from the comprehensive plan, but we do recommend that it be combined into the comprehensive plan update. The next proposal is the Downey Cottage housing proposal. It's on 3rd Avenue Southeast. It's in the Shelton View Meridian 3rd Southeast sub-area, which is a little bit of a mouthful of a sub-area. That's
where I live. I don't actually think there's a best sub-area.
So the request is to rezone this from R9600 to R2800 to allow a cottage housing development. If the middle housing code were passed as written, it would actually be permitted without a rezone. While we do find that the proposal is compelling, we have some concerns about having a site in the middle of R9600 that is zoned R2800. We haven't found any reason why this site is unique to the area. Like we're looking at more density in this area, we'd probably be looking for some sort of rapid transit stop or an intersection or a transition. And so just based on best practices and then also potential legal complications, we don't recommend moving forward with this rezone because it is so drastically different than the surrounding area. There's nothing about the site that makes it unique that would compel us to have a different zone for it. Planning Commission, when they reviewed the docket, did recommend that City Council consider the request through the 2024 comprehensive plan. So staff recommends not moving forward. Planning Commission recommends moving forward to the comprehensive plan. If City Council chooses to move forward with the request, staff would recommend that it be examined through the comprehensive plan process, as to avoid legal complications, we really would need to look at the larger area and determine what would be an appropriate zone versus one site, kind of as an island. So those are the 3 new requests. The next request, I think, is one that you all have heard plenty about. But what we are asking for tonight, and I'm going to try to make this as least confusing as possible, but it's kind of confusing. So each year, the city gets one shot at updating the comprehensive plan through these minor amendments. There's some exceptions when we can update it outside of that process. The 2022 updates have not been completed, but we've made enough progress that we can essentially do 2 in 1 year because we have our 2022 docket and we have our 2023 docket. And so assuming that we complete 2022 and 2023 in 2023, it's okay because it's technically the spillover from the previous year's docket. It's not 2 dockets being approved in 1 year. So what we are suggesting to council is the downtown transition affordable housing overlay be moved from the 2022 docket to the 2023 docket because there is one thing waiting for approval on the 2022 docket, and that is the bike plan. And the bike plan requires changes to our comprehensive plan. The bike plan cannot be fully adopted until those changes are made. And we're not confident that this isn't going to hold that up further, whereas we feel like this would be better aligned with the 2023 updates. The only other one that we know of at this time would be whatever amendments need to be made to the comprehensive plan to adopt middle housing potentially. And so that timeline, because we believe for the downtown transition affordable housing overlay, so there's 2 proposals that have been combined into one. But if we move it to the 23 docket, it allows us to have continued conversations with the community, complete the analysis, and it allows the bike plan to move forward without having to wait for us to complete this project. We have combined them together. They may be separated out just to allow them to move forward at different paces. And then one of the sites that was proposed for rezone, so the Carlson site with the red box around, see my cursor, but that property owner actually pulled out of the rezone and has not. So we're working with that applicant on determining what their request is moving forward. But because of some of those changes, it's just taking us, and the interest from the community, it's taking us longer to process this than normal. And so moving it to 23 allows the bike plan to move forward and hopefully gives us enough time to have continued conversations. move this project through Planning Commission for final review by City Council. So hopefully that was a clear enough explanation of what I think is kind of confusing even for staff as we talk about it. So final recommendation is to decline further action on the Dirt Lord rezone, to initiate the Pierce rezone through the 2024 Comprehensive Plan update, decline further action on the cottage housing rezone, and move the downtown transition affordable housing overlay amendments / Carlson and Drew's amendments to the 2023 docket. With that, I will answer any questions you all might have about the process.
To go in order, or can we pick and choose projects?
My brain can go either.
Okay. For the cottage housing on Third, it's reasonably walkable, not for everybody. It's not a mile, but it is walkable with a quiet road and a lot of actual sidewalk on 240th down to rapid transit where it's planned. So I guess Third is a dead end on one side. It doesn't connect from 240th to 228th, but what are the concerns about having just smaller houses with the bigger houses? I guess I want to understand the concerns.
The concern isn't necessarily the development that's proposed. The concern is having a site that has dramatically different zoning than the surrounding area. I hesitate to say this term. I will say it. It could be considered spot zoning, which may be more challengeable than a larger zone, or really through the comprehensive plan process determining what would be the appropriate zone for the area. I also believe that our 2800 may be more intensive a zone than is needed, and that if middle housing were passed, this zoning amendment would not be required for them to do. The development may not be exactly what they've shown, but that number of cottage homes would be permitted and be in a slightly different configuration.
So the concerns aren't so much the project, it's what it's going into, and the challengeability, to make up a word, makes sense with that explanation. So, okay, I think I understand. Thank you.
I have similar questions along that line. Do you know, and you might not have insight into this, but like, why did the property owner develop this project for this lot? Like, what was it that they appealed to them about this location? Were they just trying to do a cottage housing development and that's what they could get? Like,
Not sure why they chose that lot for this.
They already owned it.
They already owned it.
It's like family land. I don't know why I know that, but I can't cite that. Oh, yeah. Yeah, okay. So they already owned it, my understanding. And so it's kind of like, what can we do with this land? You know, my understanding was how can we do some good with this land that we have, and providing more housing for more people was kind of there.
It's sort of like they already were an island, and that's just what they wanted to do with already owned.
Yeah.
That makes
Take it with a grain of salt. I wouldn't say that under oath, but
you are on the public record.
That's why I'm adding a disclaimer.
Remember what he said about microphones earlier?
And to the point of that is that it under Christine Middle, that would make it, that would empower them to do it too. And so it makes sense to me that we wouldn't be taking that action or not recommending that action.
So do you want my thoughts? They'll be not too long, I hope. The Dirt Lord rezone, were they thinking that residential would be easier with the shoreline setback?
I believe so, that it would be more developable as residential than light industrial office.
Okay, because Securite is right next door to it, right?
Yes.
And I know that they provided a good buffer shoreline. And really thoughtful with their parking lot and making it pervious. And so I just look at that being so industrial around it, and we have a deficit for business. I can understand the hesitancy there, but I can also appreciate trying to work with the shoreline and having something that's sensitive to the shoreline, but still allow the property owner to do something with that. Is there a chance that, and I understand part of the problem was they didn't come in with enough information on what they wanted to do. Is there a chance that they could come and talk to staff and get a better idea of what they need to bring to the city before we move forward on that?
That is one way we could move forward.
Okay.
I would say, so one of the options, one of the things that the code states is that if council declines to move forward with something, there is a delay before someone could apply again, but it could also be declined without prejudice, which would give them time to work with staff over the next few months and then make another application.
And you would explain declined without prejudice, what that meant.
So I believe if you declined without, and I'm going to look at Robbie, so that if it was declined without prejudice, that would mean that they didn't have to wait that period of time.
Perfect. Okay. And then.
The code provides the flexibility to do just that.
Okay. Okay. Thanks, Robbie. And then what is the Red Barn Village zone? These guys should probably know.
Safeway area.
I don't know it.
It's zoned a lot of things. It's probably the best answer. I would have to look at the zoning map and I would have to share that with you. There's some commercial zoning, residential zoning. I think there's some.
Is there any R72 there or is it all?
I think there's R72 in some areas. It's a real hodgepodge.
Okay. And
Much like the Red Barn.
Okay, so you think that we could, that would fit with what's the Pierce project?
I think it's on the edge of it's outside of the Red Barn Village, but it's on that edge and very close. And so I think that thinking about like a transition or something would make sense.
Continuity.
Yes.
Okay. And then on the cottage housing rezone, I really love the idea of cottage house zoning. When we saw the picture of what they had, I thought, oh my goodness, but you don't really have from my spatial eye, really nice gathering areas that would fit in with homes around it. So if you're thinking, wait until we decide on cottage housing throughout the city, I'll support that because I think cottage housing would be great and still fit in with the homes around it. So I'll support you on that. And then on the move downtown transition affordable housing, is it possible to separate when it comes to us? I'm begging and pleading and on my knees. Can we separate Carlson and the Drews amendments?
Yes.
As two separate?
We can separate them out, and I think we've already thought that would make sense. And then, so they all have to be presented as one package, but it doesn't mean that you have to adopt, like, you can say, we're gonna adopt these three things and not adopt this thing or
So we need to do our work as well. That's what you're saying.
We'll
You're
give
not
you-
going to spoon feed us.
It's my understanding the final ordinance will adopt them all in one package, but you all don't have.
Consider them at the same time.
I think the final consideration would have to be done at the same time, but I believe you could give us direction that you did not wish to move forward with one of them.
We could make amendments to the packet recommendations.
Might want to just make that one agenda item for that night. Because it's a very, it's a pretty intense.
Well, they're very linked right now. Like even at public comment, at the planning commission, people were coming up and saying, I don't like this, but actually I like that other one, so it's become kind of a mishmash and it's not actually really related, except that it's the same consideration schedule.
Okay, so
is that your fear?
Yeah, let me just phrase that. If you decide at some point to separate the Carlson and the Drews amendments for us to digest, I would be more than grateful. And if not, I will figure out how to.
And through the docketing process, you could also direct staff to do that.
Okay. All right. Okay. I think that's all my input that I have on it. Thank you.
Can I jump back in on the Pierce amendments? That's really swampy area. That's just kind of north and across the county line from where I live. And I know that there's a lot of drainage concerns. And also when when Jeff gave me the tour and the drive around of Bothell, we actually ended up going down 4th Avenue Southeast and talking about the sewer and septic and drainage issues and connection issues and all of this. And so that is like, it makes a lot of sense. Like it does make sense to say, well, this is kind of part of Red Barn because it just kind of connects. It's just on the other side of the street. That is Red Barn. And those are very rural type parcels that were developed, many years ago when Bothell had a different identity. And I can tell you that there are some people who live down there who very much want to keep their rural identity. And also want to get off of septic. So, it goes both ways. And so I guess my question is, would this then kind of facilitate the process of helping that neighborhood convert from septic to sewer?
So one of the things, and one of the reasons this has come up is the applicant has extended sewer or have been approved to extend sewer to essentially end at the end of 4th Avenue. So once sewer is extended there, it's a lot easier for properties on 4th Avenue to connect to sewer, which then makes redevelopment attractive. They have to pay though, right? They have to, yeah. Okay. That being said, so a few concerns from staff is those lots are all long and narrow. And so if it were rezoned, we would want to look at potential ways to have more planned redevelopment in the area so that we didn't end up with just a long lot of something new, a rural lot, a long lot of something new, something about like minimum area for redevelopment. We also have concerns about it is very swampy. And per state law, you could apply for a reasonable use permit for all the existing lots to develop a single family home. And that goes through the hearing examiner, but we want to make sure that see if there are ways that we can incentivize developers to not redevelop those lots and potentially move that development opportunity, condense it, or do something like a clustered development so that we could preserve that area versus having single family homes being built in a swampy area that they technically have the right to do.
Yeah, I'm thinking of it through the lens of lot consolidation to allow that more design flexibility, considering environmental constraints that are there. That's what we could look at through the comp plan process instead of it just being a lot by lot basis.
Yeah, it's a little more holistic in that way. Does those same considerations also apply to the properties across the street? I know that several of them on the east side of 7th have sold and are being sold by developers because of sewer concerns. So that is a similar is that while we asked them just to move forward with the lots they had control over, because rezoning someone's lot through the private process or through the private proposal process is a little complicated of without it going through the comp plan and larger community conversation. Rezone your neighbors privately. Yeah, like we should have conversations about it. It should be a part of a community process. It shouldn't necessarily just be an application to rezone your neighbor's property. And so that's why we suggested technically you can do it, but probably not best practice. And so that's why we recommended it through the comprehensive plan, because if there's more density allowed here, we want to figure out a way to do it really sensitively so that it doesn't result in lots of that stream buffer or really piecemeal development that just feels out of place. We want to encourage like site control and larger, not larger developments per se by building, but like planned neighborhoods. Yes. We want it to become a new neighborhood. Yeah, instead of having like several houses with private roads next to each other, maybe something more cohesive. Where it's like school, slot neighborhood, acreage. Yeah, and so looking for ways that we could have some requirements to encourage lot consolidation and
encourage not a lot of reasonable use permits and do this in such a way that it's also not a huge program that the city has to administer.
On that topic, I think one thing as we look at, instead of a lot of dead end, private or not roads, as part of looking at where density would fit in some of these sub areas, especially this one, it doesn't have to be a street grid, but just not so many dead ends, It's kind of miserable when you're in anything but a car and you're trying to get somewhere and it's like you could see it in your neighbor's backyard, but you got to go all the way around to the thing. So just kind of planning where we would want roads and making an intentional network instead of like, we'll see what we get, seems like it would be really advantageous.
I have a general question. We are coming into a comprehensive plan, doing middle housing right now. How does any of this, the timing of these is not good because we're doing some massive changes that we're thinking about making massive changes pending the outcome. So in general, I agree that we postpone things, but if we postpone, would that mean they'll come back to us in the future, or
so if you
would they fit?
Yeah, if you deferred it to the comprehensive plan, it would probably be less of an individual presentation on that proposal and more as a part of the land use conversation. Whatever zoning changes may come out of the comprehensive plan, it would be more of a large analysis, less of a me giving you or staff giving you a presentation on this site is going to be rezoned. So it would be part of a larger community conversation, a part of a larger document, get as much individual focus as these amendments. But what we have found is these individual amendments are extremely time consuming and often not as impactful citywide as some of the other long range planning efforts that we have in our work plan. And so while we wish we could view every one of these and give them that individual analysis, it's probably result in us making a choice of what are we going to deprioritize to prioritize this.
Because I had the question last year when we did the docketing. I remember it was a very long list and there were some requests coming in. There's some things that the department needed to do as well. This year, we're doing this. The future is going to be similar format. Here's what like some individual projects.
So the way it was done previously, a lot of things were put on the docket that technically didn't need to be a docket proposal. They could just be, they were really more of like a work plan. And so the work plan was being brought to you all for review. And so what we've tried to separate out is the things that the code asks council to make a decision on and the things that are in the 5-year plan that was included in your packet and the work plan for 22 are more based on what did we get budget for? What do we have staff to do? What are the priorities that we've heard from council? And so presenting it a little bit more as here are the things that we plan to work on. That's community development. And then here are the things we need direction from you all on to fit into our work plan.
And I would just note too, that those are also things that in our check-ins, we can certainly talk about any of the concerns of that, of what's happening in the city, or in schedule time with the community development director to talk through how are things operating. But there is a bit of a separation between, let's look at what are the things. I think what you have before you tonight is the consideration of what are the things that council needs to do based on what's required, and the other, we can have a look. And again, they become budget conversations too. So there's still a role, but just kind of separating out of this is what does law tell us we have to do? The other is more of how are we operating and are we getting the right things done?
I think part of the process that's set up for this to happen annually is that we have our last comprehensive plan from 2015. And this kind of forces the city to refresh things and not wait for the next one. But as we get closer and closer to 2024, it almost seems like we're expending a lot of staff time and effort when we have a much larger process also going on. So to your point, I think prioritizing the Charleston, the Drews, and the downtown affordable housing overlay amendments, since that was kind of going on in 2022. That to us seemed to make sense because we could potentially resolve that, but much of the remaining work elements could really be benefit, frankly, from a larger comprehensive plan approach, since we're so close to that year.
Because we have the downtown transition. Can you make it a shorter?
The top.
The Tahoe is what we call it.
Oh, I like that.
Internally.
So that is part of the comprehensive plan. It sounds like the dirt lord may actually fall into that as well. Like all those might actually fall into a comprehensive plan conversation.
We could analyze them further through the comprehensive plan and determine if moving forward with those makes sense. It would have to go into our land use model. And of course, there's still community conversations that happen, whether it's in the comp plan or it's part of an individual effort. But it does start to add to the work plan of the comp plan too.
So we'll consider those as part of I mean, these are examples. I'm sure there are other submissions that came throughout the past years that are similar that go in, right?
Yeah.
At least the past year.
I'm trying to find the actual list of all the comp plan amendments, but there were about 6 or 7 that were deferred previously to the comp plan.
What are the implications of? Because you want to think if somebody has a good idea to implement right now. The largest factor in postponing, not is the amount of resources we're going to spend versus on a particular or a bunch of things versus the larger conversation. Is that like what we're trying to decide right now?
Yeah, what we're looking at right now is from a planning perspective, does it make sense both in terms of our land use patterns and legally? Do we have the staff time to process it? Is the proposal fully fleshed out? How much staff time is going to be spent developing the proposal versus having something that's ready to go? Those sorts of things. So the less complete the application is, the more time staff spends a lot of times just working with the applicant on that. And we have had some conversations about having a more robust checklist and making sure that we're giving better guidance to the applicants so that when they do apply, we have everything we need and we've given them the best guidance to get those materials.
Because I did read in the packet that it's like they submitted something. It's not to the extent where you can actually analyze and make sure that you check go through your checklist.
Yeah, the more information we get, the easier it is for us to do that processing and the less time it may take us so that we could fit in some of these things. And then comp plan coming up and some of the projects we're still working on from previous dockets. Time is definitely sensitive on some of these things.
And a question about the Drews Carlson thing. I agree. It makes sense to separate. I don't know how legally we can do that, but
no issue separating them. They came in separately and they got combined because they were in the same zone. So it seemed like a great way to just, seems easier to combine them since they're both in the same zone. But then unfortunately that kind of convoluted them in. And so we've even discussed as staff, it might make sense to separate them out.
I understand better. You're looking for us to just.
Yeah, and I didn't get to the last slide I realized, which was, so what our plan was.
I'm setting you up for this.
Yes, yes. Is not to necessarily ask you all to make a decision tonight, but this would be presented for final decision March 7th to City Council. So if there's any direction from you all tonight to help us form a draft recommendation too, that would of course be taken.
Go back. Sorry. Thank you. So can you tell me a little bit more about positive and negative to spot zoning?
It's not great practice. I think there's been case law about, I mean, it's kind of controversial whether something is or isn't, but in terms of how the neighborhoods feel about it, whether we could be challenged, whether we can find compelling reasons to zone it something differently than the surrounding areas, it could be a little risky for the city. That being said, if it's a compelling development, it could allow something to move forward that's not currently permitted today.
And in the area with the cottage housing as an example, it's a form of middle housing. If we do a middle housing, they would be able to do that cottage housing anyway.
Correct. So we analyzed it against the proposed code. And while there may be, I mean, of course, it'll go through the land use approval process, and in that process, we may have tweaks of what they may need to do. The count may be slightly different based on those tweaks, but at the end of the day, cottage housing would be permitted on that site, similar to what has been proposed.
And then you kind of talked about the long lots, that piece of it. How do we have any control over that in the future?
So we could design development regulations that maybe use minimum lot size for redevelopment, or different requirements that encourage or require multiple sites to be acquired. That's something we'd really need to flesh out further and work on to make sure we're creating something that's actually usable and legal. But something that we could look at, especially if we're looking at one area and we want to be thoughtful about how we do it. Making sure that we're creating regulations we could enforce when someone enforces such a weird word. Regulations we could require when applicants come in with their proposals.
So I'm asking you these questions because we heard a lot tonight from the community about just go past middle housing. And hearing you talk about spot zoning and regulations and ensuring we have regulations, how do we do that if we just pass middle housing? How do we ensure we've got regulations that are going to allow us to, well, I mean, just going back to the Pierce rezone as an example with wetlands and things, how do we just ensure that by opening up that zoning, middle housing, we don't just have a bunch of developers coming in here and just dropping and going because now they can afford to put the sewer in because they've got a higher density. I mean, how do we, I guess my concern is like listening to the community tonight and hearing us talk through this and why we don't want to just do this, these individuals, is now making me think even further about how do we make sure that we still have regulations in place to kind of control the free-for-all, I guess.
So critical areas, shorelines, all of those things would still be in place. So all these developments would still need to comply with that. And these lots, whether we rezone them and they connect to sewer and there's a higher density, or they connect to sewer and there's not a higher density, they can apply for a reasonable use permit. So essentially, you can't have a lot that has no use. We can't deprive someone of their right to use that lot. I'm not sure if a reasonable use permit would allow someone to do middle housing. I think usually it allows for a single family home at a minimum. And so those areas may not, those lots are, while they may not meet our current code, were legally created. And so as they stand today, someone could come in and meet requirements and put a single family home there, just based on case law. So I think the response is that they still have to meet critical areas code. They still have to meet zoning code. They still have to do stormwater management. They still have to do everything that a development is allowed to do today. It's just in this area we're looking at, if we are doing a larger rezone, is there opportunity to be more specific with that area to prevent development that may not be as cohesive as it could be in the long run.
And that's just this one area, right? So we have different pockets that are similar to this throughout the city, right? Yeah, it's really opening my mind up to some concerns that I've had originally. Just saying we can do it across the city without fully understanding it, because I look at this, I mean, I heard comments about, you know, how wet it was and all those different things, and sewers being brought in, and, you know, kind of understanding how that looks in its totality is important. And if you say that today you can build a single family home, yes, you can build a single family home, but by going to middle housing and rezoning it, now you can build more, right? Which is a good thing, right? But what does that more actually look like at the end? And is it? I mean, I guess the regulations and the zoning, the wetlands and critical areas and all those things would take place. So you couldn't just go build 20 homes because you have the same criteria that you would have for a single family home, right?
Yeah, so you would still have to meet the setbacks of the single, I mean, the code, as I understand it, you're still meeting the setbacks, the height requirement, the same as a single family home. So while maybe it results in more development, that development would still have the same footprint, and look and feel like a single family home.
Yeah, so so when we talk about redevelopment and we talk about development costs, and the challenges with sites like that, then what comes to mind is the cost to do the land development piece. So one piece of that is the actual cost of the land itself up front, and then it's the development of the land and what you're required to do to actually develop the land. And so we say that we want to have more affordable housing. The cost to develop that, to buy the land and then develop the land, is more cost prohibitive because of all the things that you have to go through as a developer to actually develop the land. And so, I mean, that comes to my mind as well. But as far as the what's in front of us here, the dirt, that's great. Great name for that. The dirt rezone. I would tend to agree with the recommendation. The Pierce rezone, again, would agree to the recommendation. I'm torn on the cottage housing piece, because I think it's something we do need to look at, but I think your comment about spot zoning gives me pause and concern. So I guess I would follow the recommendation on that one as well, because I'm concerned about that. And then I do agree with separation of the Carlson and Drews, and I would just say that, you know, they are two independent projects. They're two very prominent projects. And if Carlson has removed their request for the rezone anyway, I think that it just lends itself to having them separated.
So they did.
Yeah, they didn't have site control of that, so they had an agreement with their neighbor that they were okay with them moving forward. The neighbor withdrew their agreement. And so they still have some proposed changes to the zoning code, but they are not moving forward with the zone. So they would still have some development regulation considerations for planning commission and city council. But those are different than the considerations for the Drew's proposal.
Okay, we'll worry about it later when we.
Sure, I'll jump in next. I'll just go down the list. So the Dirt Lord rezone, this one interests me because just across the street, you've got R2800, there's apartments. Right behind that, there's R2800 manufactured housing. And then right behind that, or if you're going south, R4000. It's next to another OPLI. There's a GC next door to that. There's like a random 9600 in the middle of the GC. So I think the mixes are already there. The property is right next to a King County Parks property. So it's not going to be next to another, manufacturing facility. It'll be next to the gun club. But the other parcel is a King County Parks parcel. There's an easement there where there will hopefully someday be a trail that comes all the way through to Bothell. So to me, if we can get more housing, that seems like a decent place to do it. I understand the application and the details were not what we'd expect to see to make a decision. But
I don't have an issue with R2800 there. If townhomes can go there, if we can build more housing, I think that's a reasonable designation for it, given what's just across the street. It's the same zoning there, so I don't think crossing a street really should prohibit that from happening if it's feasible and if it's more likely to happen, if we're more likely to get housing and we're not likely to get, light industrial use out of it just because of the way the site has to be configured with the wetland buffers and everything else. I'm open to us considering that. So if we can provide feedback and get more information that we need in order to make a decision and bring that into the comp plan, I think I'd be open to that. The Pierce rezone is super wet and swampy in there, so I have concerns about habitat and what will happen there. So I'm okay with the staff recommendation. Cottage housing is super interesting to me. I think it's a really fascinating thing where we can get a real life example of cottage housing in town and we can actually see what are they going to sell for? Is there demand for it? What does that look like? I do understand spot zoning. It's kind of a weird thing because we can change the zoning now or we can see what happens with missing middle and it appears anyway. So I'm okay with Planning Commission's recommendation to include it in the comp plan review. If I believe that's what the recommendation is. It is weird having one, piece of property with cottage housing, but the other side of the street is all developed neighborhoods. So I don't think it's out of place in the neighborhood. It's just a different way of putting housing there. But I'll leave that up to the process there. And then I also support the separation of Drews and Carlson. I think the feedback has been just general for both of them, but I think it more applies to one than the other based on the way people have framed it. And I would like to see those separated for consideration and also for considering it. I'd like to see them, come separately because I think there will be a lot for both, a lot of public comment for both, and it'll be easier to process them one by one.
Thinking, because we're on the same page. Snohomish United, right? Thanks for that, Mason. But I think the one thing too about having just one cottage housing development before we have code for it is the danger of saying, let's see how this one does, is then it's scarce in the city. It's new, it's unique. People are like, oh yeah, I want that and I have some money, right? So we've seen that in other municipalities where the first one, everything's super expensive. Everybody's like, why do we do this anyway? Like it has to build over time. So I would almost want to wait until there's more opportunity in more parts of the city with missing middle or however that happens to have more examples. And I fear it's like what, you watch your first kid so closely and you assume the next kids are going to be like that. And that's not how it happens. Everyone with multiple kids could probably back me up on that. So I think that's my hesitation about going forward too, with just the one development, especially when we don't have the code that would determine a lot of that in place. So
that's a good point, and something I think that's worth pointing out is that in this process, Planning Commission and Council's job is to really review code amendments and the land use recommendations. But whatever you're shown by the applicant as their proposal is not guaranteed to be their proposal. So our 2800 could allow apartments, it could allow townhomes, it could allow a number of things. And so while it's being presented as potentially cottage housing, it doesn't necessarily guarantee cottage housing. And so I think that's the other consideration to keep in mind is that all of these proposals are really just to get the zoning in place for something like that. And it may be used to determine what amendments may need to be made. But at the end of the day, it could sell, it could sit, it could be changed based on what would be the most marketable or profitable thing for the land.
Can you not provide a permit if they decide to bait and switch? Or was that Robbie question?
Yeah, I was gonna just stare at Robbie until he.
They could do the things.
On the regulations, the zoning category, they're free to build whatever they would want in that category.
And we don't have, as far when permitting, when you do the next level down, it's like, here's the rules you have to follow if you want to build within this particular category, to use your, then can, planners not, or planning department cannot provide a license, a permit, or say, well, you have to do it this way because this is what your original plan. We decided to move forward because you said this. No, it doesn't work that way.
Not necessarily. It's allowed in classification of the zoning category. It's allowed.
So bait and switch is allowed?
Submit a building permit with best to whatever is in place. So even if they had talked about cottage housing before, if the zoning category would allow it.
Something else that will, if the zoning allows something cottage plus other stuff, then they can do the other stuff if they decide that that's.
Yeah,
okay,
and,
cool.
and certainly, there's the ways of revising the zoning classifications, creating a new one along those lines. That's all stuff that typically takes place in the comprehensive plan process in order to figure out what uses are going to allow somewhere.
But still, we got the pro sitting next to me. He's like,
Oh,
I don't
wait
think
a
so.
I don't want to get accused of that. No.
I was gonna say, can you kind of fact check me on this? And I mean that to everybody, but zoning gives you basically a 3D space on a lot and a number of units you can put there based on how big the lot is and what the zoning is.
Yeah.
But it doesn't, you can't say like houses with water slides. It's kind of like what they want within this 3D area. Code to say houses.
Cottage housing.
I mean-
Slides.
And we
Do you live in a pirate ship zone?
water slides.
That can actually happen.
It's often not a bait and switch. It's often like, this is what they think they want to do. And then once they actually start figuring out their financing and figuring out how it's going to work, then it's like, it's a good idea, but this one's better
I
because
think we've seen that. A good example of that is with Bothell Urban, is that like they brought something to us and then like penciled out and they're like, oh, we got to change that. Right. And so it's really common in the process to just figure out that something needs to be changed because you're
My
like,
question is how much, we're going outside of this.
sorry.
Yeah, we've lost it.
Time with freedom.
We've lost the plot.
We'll ask,
These are good questions though, Ron, because actually I think it's educational for all of us to hear that if we were to do that spot zone, go in there, they want cottage housing. It's what the community wants to see right now. And then all of a sudden they say, okay, we got our zoning now. Let's go build an apartment complex. Then we're going to get the same thing we got up here. Everybody's going to become, why are you building a 5-story apartment complex? Well, it's been rezoned. We can do that.
We could.
It's within our right.
The concept plan that you have is a way to illustrate what that particular property owner is interested at that time. It doesn't illustrate every alternative that rezoning could give them.
I know you keep going to the middle housing. We'll have the discussion.
I just want to make sure that we're all learning.
But this is true in any case.
100%.
It's super important because it's so easy to get married to like, oh, they're cute tiny houses, but it's really important to understand like it might not be, and it might not even be an intentional, change. It might just be what happens.
We rename the missing middle discussion cute tiny houses. That was good. I like that. Yeah.
To what you said about like only having one and prices being higher because demand is there. I think it could cut the other way too. People may see how much expensive they are and like the other direction because they're not going to pay $800,000 for a cottage. So
If your first kid sleeps all night and your second one doesn't, you're going to feel cheated. Right? Like, that's,
so
I don't know why I keep going back to the kid metaphor, but.
the point that was made about not getting what the concept is I think a very good one because you can fall in love with the design and the concept and get excited about it and then
no Trader Joe's.
you get something completely different.
Only too soon.
It's not what I agree to. So that's a really good point that was brought up.
So I've got a couple questions, and I'm just going to kind of go in order. For the Dirt Lord property, the applicant, the letter that was submitted basically referenced that, like, I can't really do anything with this property under the current zoning as it is. It seems like he's more searching for something that he actually can do with it. Is there a chance that we could look at this as like a individual project basis instead of a rezone comp plan to try to work with him to see what we can do under the current zoning, if there are parking exceptions or something like that we can do for that particular property?
could talk with staff about doing, kind of getting a general idea of what might be permitted. But we don't necessarily have the full capabilities of like mapping out all the setbacks and all of that, but yeah, the code would define what he could do and then what those shoreline setbacks and whatnot would be.
If there's a way we could use some of the parking and security that is ever full, like an overflow or something like that, to be able to justify actually being able to build something there that fits in the current zoning.
I think the property owner has to do sort of a feasibility study first, and then if it's like almost you could do this, then that's where they have to come in. But I think there's something on their side that they have to do to get that from like a professional, because I don't know that it would be city staff that says, here's all what you can build, right?
Just in the applicant through that process, kind of what that would look like. Like, here's what it would look like to do something underneath the current zoning.
Staff is always happy to sit down with folks and talk to them about the property.
Perfect. Thank you. The Pierce proposal, are all of the lots equally wet in all places? Or is there like one side, here's where the water is, and it gets gradually drier as you go up the hill?
So which one is it?
In the south part.
I don't know.
Sort of. Here we go. Like, so you have
Fourth. Is this map upside down? Is the north on the bottom?
No.
Why is it? It looks weird.
There was one of the maps did have that.
Okay, I was, because
Yes.
I don't know.
So I mean, these lots here are of course the most wet.
Yeah. Like, I mean, this is right next to a future BRT line. I mean, this is kind of an area where it would be convenient to have growth, but we've obviously also have the critical areas, and there's been a lot of discussion around this already, but is there a way kind of within the comp plan that we can say, hey, like, if you build away from the critical area, you can build a little bit more? Like,
I think some of the thought
that one.
is, you know, could we say in all of these lots, you could have, let's pretend there's not a critical area there, you could have 20 units, but you can't have 20 units because you can't build on the critical area. Could we allow them to put all of that density, like cluster it in one part of the site and preserve the rest? Are there things we can do in our code to encourage or require that so that we don't end up with a lot of reasonable use permits? We end up with one cohesive development that preserves that area.
well, and we can have like, I want to have my cake and eat it too all the time. Like, if there's a way we can have more housing in an area that's right next to a BRT line where we desperately need it, but also protect the critical areas at the same time, that's what I would like to do.
I think we could probably figure out something pretty close to that.
Cool.
Already sidewalks, which is not super common in Snohomish County.
It's true.
There's not sidewalks along
240th has some on one side. Yeah, not all the way up to Meridian, but
I don't know if there's sidewalks on 4th, but
they're not.
yeah.
I know I sound sad. I'm like, but they're close, but it is kind of actually.
Study session. Why you? I mean, the cottage housing in Shelton View, I mean, it's a cool proposal. It's the kind of thing I want to see all over the place, but I agree with everything that you've said about the spot rezone. And honestly, like, we've got middle housing coming back this year anyway. So if they can do something that's close to that, that's, you know, within the same vein, I would just point the applicant to the public engagement process. Totally agree with everything on Carlson Drews and having the conversations separately. With the Carlson project, is there a way or some sort of forum that we could set up a conversation between a couple folks from the neighborhood and the developer? I've been out there and I've been in the backyard, and there's a bunch of really tall trees that are right there, and they don't have to keep those trees, I don't believe. But if there's a way that we could give them a little bit of extra height over what they're asking for, but keep the trees in a bigger setback, like, I think there might be a way through a conversation we can reach something agreeable. There also might not be, but I feel like it's worth a shot. Is there any precedent for that? Is that a thing that we do?
I don't know if we have done that in the past in that role of capacity. That's like necessarily kind of been a mediator between the applicant and sometimes through the current planning process, we'll, you know, communicate with the applicant to provide responses to the neighbors. This might get a little bit into what can we require them to agree to at this point if it's not codified. Similar to, you can show us, one thing and develop
Yeah.
something else. I'm not sure we could necessarily
Require
them to,
honor the terms of the
That's the
agreement.
issue, the whole
Yeah.
time.
yeah, so it would be whatever the code,
Allows was
Yeah.
then allowable.
yes.
There's not a way to do that on a project basis, just purely a code amendment rezone.
Like when they come in for application, what staff would be doing is reviewing it against the code, against, the SEPA process, whatever other things may be required. And then, of course, if
So
community members are,
Totally.
community members can communicate with staff through that. We always share those comments with the applicant, try to work with them on what they can do. But it would come down to what does the code require them to do.
I mean, those are my questions, and I agree with the staff recommendations on all of the things that you brought us today.
It sounded to me like you have a bunch of things, bunch of resource intensive activities, and then we have a massive resource intensive activity. If you consider housing coming up here. So two big things, and then we have those things that can feed into that. If they can be sucked into the overall project, then I will agree. But if they're not going to get sucked into the overall comprehensive plan, then maybe we consider those projects separately, because we do need more housing.
Question about the 6 or 7 that you said have already been kicked forward in the comp plan. Are any of these projects like those projects? I want to make sure we're treating these ones through the same lens as we treated those when we added those in.
I would have to go back and look at them in more detail. I did kind of pop around to see what some of them are. There's a number of them that are on 7th, so not too far from the 4th. So those seem to fit in. There's one on 90th that seemed to be nearby.
Right north of Red Barn Village itself.
Yeah, and actually one that in full disclosure, we had a proposal that was added to the 2022 docket last year, but we met with the applicants, the Ferrulo request, and we talked to them about the Red Barn Village sub-area planning process, and they asked to just be deferred to the comp plan. So we kind of automatically did that just because they agreed it made sense, and it made sense for us to do. And then the Pierce request, there's been a few, there's a request that's in, I think, on 187th where the adjacent parcels have the same zoning. And so it seemed to make sense that adjacent parcels are zoned that we could reasonably do that. I think there's a few requests in Nike Hill that I are not off the top of my head popping up, but we can definitely look at them and make sure that we applied the same lens in the past that we're applying today so that we aren't giving anything a treatment that we wouldn't have in the past.
There'll be good information on what comes back on the 7th. So make sure we won't get Robbie busy with any litigation.
Yeah. The fewer executive sessions, the better.
Wow, it's quiet.
No, I never know how these study sessions end. There's no motion.
Neither
It's just
neither
kind
do
of,
any of us. So.
What you need, I guess that's the.
I think we have what we need. We'll put something together for the 7th. And then that night we'll just be asking for you all to make a motion on that decision.
Okay.
We're doing council conversations here. Or there?
I was just about to ask that question. Here, conversations here. Perfect.
What's the council conversation?
Okay.
I'm not calling on anybody.
I think that we need to talk about that. So I love being in this room already for the study sessions. It's not as weird as, because it's more casual, but I think we need to make sure that we're all on the same page about like what the etiquette is, because I think we talked about it being conversational, and that might mean different things to different people. Like Rami, I appreciate that you were like, Mason's talking, and Ethan was like, nah. Like, we're all gonna have different ideas of that. So I think it's important that we, it doesn't have to be like a formal document, but I think we don't want to accidentally step on people's toes and have it make like quiet resentment when it doesn't need. So,
Totally.
I already resent you, so.
I'm not worried about it.
I agree.
Yeah, no, it's good, because I mean, we're never all gonna start from the same place.
What are your thoughts on this one?
Be casual. Have fun with it.
I-
Study session.
Assume goodwill.
Pieces of fudge, you over.
Have you two done these casual ones before?
Very casual, yes.
No, we're,
Go around everybody's house.
I think like, don't interrupt mid-sentence, but if someone's kind of stopped and there's been an answer and you're like, blah, important thing. But I know that that's my whole personality is, blah, so I don't want to.
That's why it's called a study session.
There's also like a good conversation or good question there about side conversation. Because
Yeah, Jenny was showing me her map because I needed some help.
if you get too casual, then you end up with like groups kind of talking, and that's really hard for the public to hear.
Yeah, the first one of us to do this from home is gonna have thoughts.
Well, I think, like, if I look back at the retreat, we all had casual conversations at the retreat, the same thing. Out of that retreat came a lot of great, amazing conversations, so if we're.
There it is.
There we go. There we go. No, I'm saying, be casual.
And if Rami interrupts me, I'll be like, hey, step off, brah, and then keep talking, and it'll be okay.
Come on, man.
Just mind your business on that side. No kidding.
Oh, no, I was just gonna say, we can find a way to raise our hand like we did at the retreat, but.
I noticed that. That was something that I brought up with Kyla. I was like, so this might be awkward for the introverts in the room. We're trying to pop in and get something done, but
But it's hard because the rest of us can fit.
you're just yourselves.
Yeah. Is it possible to do this kind of format for other conversations like the one we had with?
The comprehensive plan.
Yeah, the comprehensive plan.
I think because we're voting, we have to be in there.
Oh, is that right?
Because that was a contract.
Does it matter where we sit to vote?
Hey, this is council conversation.
Sitting at the table, I have a question.
Yeah, so the historic distinction has been exactly that, is that for study sessions, one of the things that we would like to be able to say for study session is that no decisions are gonna be made. You ask a question of, could it be done? Yeah, I think one of the things that we're working on the staff side though too, is to really look at the pacing of when we bring topics forward. So tonight's a good example. This item is a good example, as we could have had you have this conversation and make a motion tonight. But we wanted to facilitate the conversation to be able to have this type of dialogue. And so it's been separated out of where there would be a study session as a distinct meeting type and then come back for action. And so it's a decouple them. So an example of that in some of the planning, sometimes it takes a while to turn the ship, but for the comp plan discussion, really wanted to get moving forward with those contracts. Otherwise, we could have made that a study session and brought the contracts back later too. So I think you'll start seeing some correction, especially if this format is working for council. We'll do our job of scheduling items so that you can have the best of both.
I like it. I feel like I needed to change from my blazer to my sweater, like Mr. Rogers.
It always comes back to Mr. Rogers. Some Rogers or another.
Good, thank you. I enjoyed this. It brought back probably because we moved from there to here, we still get Mr. Robert as oversight over how we about saying things. Because at the offsite, we were actually more casual. And it's because we had a facilitator, we actually Tyler picked on people to speak or whatever, and sure that everybody had a voice in the conversation versus some people thought more than others.
I like how he included me in that. Introvert.
Well, I also don't think the answer is like, Jenny, you haven't spoken, because that's a good way to scare an introvert out of the room, right?
No, I like it. I think we can get used to this format.
Kyle called it an 8-second delay.
It felt good. Offsite, it felt good coming out of it because we accomplished, so especially when we started whiteboarding or whatever, white paper and doing this, it felt good to collaborate and come up with some good.
But it's hard for people that come to watch these things to follow when you're in this format.
Is it hard?
It is hard. Because there's no, you can't tell who's talking. You don't hear everything.
From where you're sitting. It's probably harder if you're watching it remotely.
Well, the microphones pick it up differently than your ear. So I think that's one thing about if you're in the room watching versus it's being broadcast in chambers, right? So that might be sort of a viewer's note, depending on where you're at.
Well, that's good feedback.
That is, and it might actually, it's a good point.
Actually better out there.
It's probably a lot easier to
That's
hear.
what I was
It's
thinking, yeah.
actually better, like even for me, it's a lot clearer. And then the camera's right, it's a giant screen on this one.
Does that camera?
I like,
That camera does
No,
not.
that's the view, James. That's the view. That camera is right there.
that,
So the senior center,
Something like a push ball we throw.
the camera. Pause.
That follows.
It
automatically
zooms in on the,
Here.
yeah, it zooms in on the
Oh, yeah.
person.
There's room for a camera person to just follow us.
We can have a robot camera.
I don't actually like that idea, just.
I think,
We actually have a King 5 resident that lives in Bothell that's a cameraman.
oh, yeah.
We can, one of the things that we've talked about is, if this format is of interest, then we can invest in some things too. And I think, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure what you're describing is that they do have an owl that would be something that we could
Oh,
set up and really tap into.
Is there an accessibility, someone specializing in that we can talk to make sure that we're still keeping an accessible format when we're in here? Because it's easy to say, it's more audible in there or whatever, but like if we have someone who can really apply like a framework to it, because I know like in tech, there's frameworks and standards for accessible things. So I don't know if there's an option there.
I was kind of lobbying to go to the senior center and have it.
Oh, there you go. Well, that's another thing is at some point we ought to have the conversation of,
Go hang out with seniors.
going out into the neighborhoods and
Beautiful.
that's, let's master this.
Yeah, I agree.
Mark it up on your bingo sheet.
All right. If I had a gavel in here, I'd.
No, that's good.
No,
But you like jumped through the roof.
We're actually grateful that we're here and the gavel's in there.
Yeah, okay.
It's casual, just say like Thompson out or something.
Mic drop.
That sounds weird.
It does, don't do
Yeah,
that.
I'm not gonna do that.
That would date you.
Something I'm scared of. I feel that in my bones when I wake up in the morning. Anyway, we're in a public meeting right now and we're talking about, so we should probably adjourn.
Yep.
And, it's been fun. We'll see y'all next week.
Yeah. It's March.
Yes.
In 2 hours, it is March.
Don't mind if I do.